boys here, the whole committee. We have two joint assigned bills that we're starting off with, and those are House Bill 255 and 310. First one is Delegate Boyce's paint stewardship law. Gee, have we seen that before? Yeah. Then there's 253, Delegate Shetty, 299 and 365, Delegate Lehman. House Bill 325, Delegate Terraza. I understand she's got a bill in another committee, so we will work it as we work it. Then House Bill 378, Delegate Love, Black Bear Conflict. Sounds like foreign policy in Eastern Europe. And then there's House Bill 386, Delegate Jacobs, Natural Resources, Blue and Flathead Catfish Trot Lines. Okay, and then we're going to end with Delegate Morgan's House Bill 389. We have 63 witnesses. Joining us for the first bill from Economic Matters are Delegates Queen, Valderrama, and Adams. And there they are, yeah. And so let's begin with 255. Regina, take it away. Is this the third, fourth, or fifth year for this bill? I can't keep track.
I'll make that notation in my...
Okay.
Can I call up my panel?
Yes, please do.
Please join me, panel.
Okay.
And if there aren't enough
Paint
chairs, we can pull the chairs back.
Stewardship. And as always, sponsors have 4 minutes, witnesses have 2 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you so much. And for the record, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, I am Delegate Regina T. Boyce, presenting HB 255, Maryland State Maryland Paint Stewardship Program. And for historical reference, this bill passed this committee and the House in 2020, 2021, and 2022, FYI. So really, I want to say, show of hands, how many people have 5 to probably 20 cans of paint, some type of stain or varnish in their basement, storage, right? A lot. And yes, I see you. Thank you, Delegate Adams. And you have them because you want to use it again at some point. You've got some type of paint that you don't know if the color still exists, so you hold on, or quite frankly, there isn't enough opportunity to just kind of get rid of it. So we hold on to it. So because of that, this is your bill. So HB 255 establishes the paint care program in Maryland. There are currently 11 established programs across the country, of course, in California, Colorado, Connecticut, and Washington, D.C., Maine, Minnesota, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington State. If passed, Maryland will be the 12th established program in the country. 10% of all paint purchased in the U.S., about 78 million gallons per year, goes unused. According to the Paint Stewardship Institute, it costs more than $500 million to manage end-of-life paint in the U.S., an average of $8 per gallon to recycle. About 80% of that 10% of paint can be recycled into new paint or used again. The program in Canada leads the world in post-consumer recycling. The program is in every province, and in 2017, Canada recycled 28 million kilograms of paint, enough to paint 2 million houses. Recycling 1 gallon of paint could save 13 gallons of water, 1 quart of oil, 250,000 gallons of water pollution, 13.74 pounds of CO2, and save enough energy to power the average home for 3 hours or cook 6 meals in a microwave oven. Created by the American Coatings Association, paint manufacturers, paint care nationwide, its goal is to decrease paint waste and recycle more post-consumer paint by setting up drop-off locations in each state. The program is funded by a fee placed on each container of paint sold in the state that is between a pint and 5 gallons. The fee fully funds the program, including the yearly independent audit. Paint Care partners with paint and hardware stores, as well as solid waste, household hazardous waste programs, say that 5 times fast, to identify and create voluntary drop-off sites throughout the year. Partnerships with HHW programs and government collection programs reduce yearly costs in transportation, recycling, and proper disposal. Post-consumer paint is often the #1 product by volume and cost coming into HHW programs nationwide. The U.S. has 131 EPR, or Extended Producer Responsibility laws, on 16 products in 33 states and D.C. These EPRs protect over 1 billion acres of land and over 250 million people. EPR products include items such as batteries and mattresses, medication, carpet, solar panels, e-products, and syringes. The bill before you today is an example of an EPR, and I am hoping that this body will again vet this bill, consider it to be a useful program for our state, and certainly ask again for your favorable report. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I'll go, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Barve, members of the committee. My name is Drew Vetter, here on behalf of the American Coatings Association, a nonprofit trade association that advocates on behalf of the paint and coatings industry. This proposal represents the industry saying that there is a better approach to handling unused paint, and the industry will spearhead the effort to collect, transport, and process leftover paint in a more responsible way. The bill requires the industry to submit a planned MDE, which will contain a few key elements, including partnerships with retailers to establish a convenient network of locations to drop off unused paint, and how Paint Care will coordinate with county governments to assume some or all of the responsibility of handling unused paint, which can result in cost savings for those counties, and a description of how the program will be paid for, which is through a paint stewardship assessment added to the purchase price of paint to cover program cost. It's a nominal assessment, typically less than $1 per gallon of paint, the revenue from which can only be used to operate the paint stewardship program. A variety of stakeholders benefit from this bill. Consumers benefit from having a convenient network of locations to dispose of unused paint. Retailers benefit from the additional foot traffic to their locations and through being able to offer an additional service to their customers. County governments benefit. County governments realize the benefit of having the option to get out of the business of collecting leftover paint and seeing cost savings as a result. And the environment. This program benefits the environment through diverting unused paint from the waste stream, reusing it so that it does not end up in landfills and waterways. For these reasons, we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm Heidi McAuliffe with the American Coatings Association. Very excited, again, that Delegate Boyce is our sponsor for this program. We're very excited to bring it to Maryland. We really hope this is the year. I want to note at the outset that I also filed some support letters for our program from Clean Harbors, which is a transporter of hazardous waste, as well as two retailers that work with our program in the District of Columbia, Annie's Ace Hardware and Jenks Hardware. Those are filed electronically, but if you need copies of them, I'm happy to share with them. My job today is to tell you a little bit about the finances of this program and how we collect this waste stream, divert it from landfills, recycle as much as possible, and we do it as efficiently as we can. So the expense side of the ledger is really the collection, transportation, and processing costs for the leftover paint. That is really 75% of the budget. So that's paying the haulers to go to all of the collection locations, pays for all the supplies for retailers, including the bins and some other things, and then pays for the actual processing of the paint, determining whether it can be recycled or if it has to be landfilled. The revenue side of the ledger is the fee that is assessed on a retail sale of paint. As Drew explained, on a gallon of paint, it's typically about 75 cents, no matter what the brand is. Every single brand is assessed the same fee. That generates the revenue for 100% of this program. It is completely voluntary for retailers to participate in it. We really hope that this will be the year for Maryland, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So we ask for a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Who'd like to go next?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein, and committee members. I'm Carolyn Parsa, speaking on behalf of the over 70,000 members and supporters of the Maryland Sierra Club in strong support of HB 255. I want to thank Delegate Boyce for her leadership on this bill. And as she mentioned, 10% of purchased paint goes unused, and most of it can be recycled. When dumped in the trash or down the drain, though, unused paint adds to the cost of waste disposal and can contaminate the environment. 18 counties and Baltimore City offer paint collection and recycling to residents, but often it isn't convenient, sometimes at a central location or just a few days a year. 5 counties offer no paint collection or recycling at all. But paint is recyclable, and the Paint Stewardship Program is an effective and established way to do it. Programs already operate in 10 states and Washington, D.C., offering convenient locations for returning leftover paint through participating retailer locations. With this plan, every county in Maryland will increase collection, reuse, and recycling of leftover paint, which helps Maryland meet its recycling goals. Counties that currently offer paint collection will save tens of thousands of dollars annually. For example, in 2019, Prince George's County spent $165,000 on paint collection and recycling. And under the Paint Stewardship Program, taxpayers will no longer have these costs. The program is financed by an assessment on each can sold, and the money collected may not exceed the costs of running the program. The program will be subject to public accountability and oversight, and also MDE must approve the program plan, annual reports, audits, and the plan is renewable every 5 years. We urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next?
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I am Sanjeev Bagaria, and I'm the CEO of GDB International, a leading paint recycling company in the US for 25 plus years. I'm also the founding president of International Paint Recycling Association, which comprises of all the major paint recyclers in the USA and Canada. I'm testifying today in support of the HB 255, the Paint Stewardship Bill. Maryland residents generate approximately 1.3 million gallons of leftover paint each year. Leftover paint have an adverse impact on the environment. Just to give an example, a gallon of paint can contaminate drinking water for 50 people for the whole year. Enacting HB 255 would provide up to $12 million of financial savings to Maryland municipalities, establish several convenient locations for Maryland residents to drop off their leftover paint, and it will create hundreds of jobs. Environmentally conscious citizens demand today that we have a solution for leftover paint. HB 255 is consistent with paint stewardship legislation passed in 10 states and District of Columbia. This is a model bill which has a tremendous result since 2009. It has collected more than 60 million gallons of paint. It has saved local government over $240 million in paint transportation and processing fees, created hundreds of jobs, and added more than 2,000 voluntary collection sites. The recycled paint sold in the USA meets the same performance, quality, and testing criteria as any high-quality branded paint at the hardware chains. I urge you to pass the bill HB 255, as it will not only save money for local governments, but it will also help protect the environment and strengthen the overall recycling industry of the state. The landfill solution is not an environmentally friendly solution. Recycling is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who'd like to go next? I'm going to assume you're Brett Rogers.
Yes, I am. Yep, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Brett Rogers with Paint Care, speaking in favor of HB 255. In the 11 state programs that we're already operating with Paint Care, you're hearing a little bit about the benefit to the consumer. I think it's over a quarter of the U.S. population is already served by this program in those 11 states. But I also think it's important to mention a few of the professional and business community audiences that really benefit from the program. We've talked about the retailers, and the retailers do get those benefits of increased foot traffic, opportunity to meet new customers. Even if they don't have their own environmental motivation, which many do, their consumers do. We know that more and more consumers are savvy. They don't want to hold on to waste. They don't think they should be holding on to something like paint, and they want an opportunity to drop it off responsibly. But in addition to that, painting contractors and other professionals who use a lot of paint can go under the radar a little bit. They have to purchase a lot of paint for themselves and their customers, and they have to pay that fee. And we talk to a lot of painting contractors and realtors, property managers, other business owners. This morning we got a request from the Denver Broncos of all people. And what they see as the benefit is they do pay a small fee, and then they get a large volume pickup from us. So that's one service we offer in addition to those drop-off sites at retailers. We'll pick up your paint at your site at no additional cost if you have 100 gallons or more. And we're serving hundreds and hundreds of those in each state. So that's something that we benefit the contractor. Painting contractors have no option. Many businesses are excluded from government-run waste facilities or have to pay hefty fees to utilize them. So as soon as they understand that, they're on board with the program as well. Where we operate, we've already collected over 62 million gallons of paint processed at this point. Most of it is latex, and most of it has been recycled. I want to also just quickly mention that when we launch in a new state, we have lots of lessons learned from our previous states about educating the retailers, the consumers, and the rest of the business community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand we have one virtual witness, Lalonde Rehard. Mr. Rehard, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair Brave and members of the committee. My name is Leland Rehard. I'm a senior associate for the Product Stewardship Institute. I am here in strong support of House Bill 255. PSI is a 20-year-old national non-for-profit with membership from 47 state agencies and hundreds of local governments. We worked with the paint industry and other stakeholders for 4 years, starting in 2003, to mediate the model agreement that was signed in 2007 by the paint industry, the EPA, numerous state and local government agencies, and paint recyclers. This model is the basis for laws enacted in the 10 states and the District of Columbia, which have resulted in the collection of over 60 million gallons of paint. It is also the basis for House Bill 255. Maryland residents generate approximately 1.3 million gallons of leftover paint each year. Most of this paint is disposed of in the trash or down household and storm drains. Most local governments cannot afford to help manage this paint. Enacting House Bill 255 would provide millions of dollars of financial benefit to Maryland municipalities, establish new convenient locations for residents to drop off their paint year-round, increase paint reuse and recycling, protect Maryland's waterways, reduce greenhouse gases, support the growth of the recycled paint manufacturing sector, and support recycling sector jobs. Our organization has evaluated several paint care programs and found widespread satisfaction among retailers, municipal governments, and paint consumers. We request a favorable report for House Bill 255.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from my committee or any of the, Delegate Ruth has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Boyce, for bringing this, really important bill, and, hopefully this is the year. I know that we've heard this before, so I feel bad asking you to walk through this, but could you just walk through what the requirements on retailers would be and what their, like the assessment fee and what the different requirements are?
Sure, and then I'll let the panel weigh in. So the way I understand it is that the assessment is different in every state, is because it is determined by the volume of paint sold in the state. And so, again, that's going to be from a pint up to 5 gallons, and that assessment can be different. The way I understand it, and there is, I would say, opposition that would say this is a tax, and taxes are essentially created for revenue for the state. This does not do so. So it's essentially sold wholesale, and then when retailers sell it, one of the ways you know that your hardware store or paint stores are a participant in the program is that you would receive materials about not only where to recycle within the area, but also to Paint Care's point is how much paint you should be buying so that you also don't have extra paint. And so those materials are supposed to be given upon purchase of paint in a hardware or a paint store. And so that is how it's assessed. Did anyone add? You want to add anything?
Could I add a few
Yes,
things?
please.
There's no requirement for retailers to participate as a collection location. They do so voluntarily. And when they do sign up as a collection location, Paint Care will provide them all the materials that they need, including the cubic yard bin, training materials for their staff, a spill kit just in case. We also will have paint care staff that will visit each location a couple of times a year and make sure that they're servicing that particular location with all the things that they need. They will make sure that they have all the contact information for our transporters and set up the schedule for the transporters. So retailers really make their space available, train their folks to accept paint from consumers, and then work with Paint Care to make the rest of it work. We try to make it as painless as possible for retailers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, what is this tax on the low-income people of this state of Maryland? I don't see a fee or any of the testimony has not said that. How much is it per gallon, per quart, per pint of paint?
So again, that is determined upon this bill passing. It would be determined by the volume of paint sold in each state. And so it is not one set fee across the country, it's a fee determined per each state. And so I'm not sure what, if you can elaborate on how it affects low-income individuals.
So is there a commission or something that's going to establish this fee or some ruling body?
So the plan will establish the fee, and that plan then has to be the program. The program will establish the fee and the parameters that has to then be
And they're not part of
approved.
the state of Maryland. Is there residents of the state of Maryland in this?
MDE approves the plan that Paint Care will establish once this bill passes.
And the gentleman talking about the recycling, I'd like to know a little something about the process of the recycling. What are you doing with this paint?
So in our program, the latex paint, the water-based paint gets recycled. And one of the good things about the latex paint is that it is very easily it can be recycled. And the percentage of recycling is pretty high. So as opposed to oil-based or solvent-based paint, where there are a lot of more complexities, water-based paint gets recycled. So the way it works is that the paint that gets collected from the different collection sites, they come to a centralized location. And there, and let's say, for example, it's a recycling center, then the first step is that the paint gets sorted by color. So when you have like a section of blues and the greens and the reds, and once it gets sorted, there are workers who are trained to basically test the paint more visually. They would stir the paint and see if it's okay, if it's not like something that is bad or smelly or things like that. Once that paint gets through the screening process, it gets poured up in different vats. After that, it's stirred in a very vigorous mixers. And then we have chemists there who will evaluate and put all of the additives and chemicals to make sure that the paint conforms to almost as the same quality as virgin paint. So the paint will go through the same testing process so that there are low VOCs, you don't have any heavy metals. So if you would compare to a recycled paint or a branded paint and you do not have a label, I would say it will be very difficult to say which one is which.
So you're not just watering it down?
No, we are not watering it down at all. I mean, if, for all you may know that the recycled paint, the old paints are normally, it's water-based, the water actually gets absorbed a lot. So it's a very high viscous, good quality paint at a very economically driven price. So there are a lot of benefits to that.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Boyce, for being so persistent with this bill. It's, I think, a great example of stewardship legislation. So my question, and I apologize if it's addressed somewhere in written testimony, but I was curious if anyone could speak to how this would potentially impact the retail supply of recycled paint. I know I frequent a Habitat for Humanity restore in Montgomery County that sells recycled paint. So how much would this help any retailers that either already sell recycled paint or may be interested? And then related question, how much do you, I guess, hope that it will help educate consumers about the availability and the quality of recycled paint?
Thank you for the question. You had a couple questions there. With regard to the retail supply of recycled content paint, this really is a boon to the recycled content paint market. I mean, we're providing additional feedstock for processors like GDB and others across the country to continue to develop that marketplace. We also work very closely with some Habitat for Humanity stores. Reuse is, the number one item on the hierarchy: reduce, reuse, recycle. Or I guess it's number 2 after reduce. But so we do try to work very closely with the Habitat for Humanity stores and other resale stores to literally take the paint out of the bin from the retailer and put it on a shelf for somebody else to use. If a school or a other consumer or some other place can come in and see a ceiling white can of paint, they can just take that right off the shelf without any additional processing. So we do work with them very closely in our relationships.
And then about the awareness or the education issue, similar to Delegate Otto's question, there must be people that think, oh, this is an inferior product, it's watered down. How do you think it will help? How might it help with that?
A couple of things, and maybe Brett and Sanjeev can answer that as well. But part of our mission with the Paint Care program is to educate consumers. Number one, how to buy just as much product as you need so you don't have a lot left over. But we also educate them on the way to actually manage the end of life of paint. And we provide all of that resource material to retailers to hand out when people are buying paint. So we're really, really trying to raise awareness about that sort of management issue. But
And just to add to the question about the perception on the recycled paint being inferior, so we are recycling for the last 25 years. 10 years back, definitely we would see that people will come with this preconceived notion, that it is a recycled paint, it must be smelling, it may be bad, watered down, that's why it's a low price. But the good news is that as we are seeing that the community is very much aware about helping environmental friendly products. I mean, we are supplying to more than 300 Habitat stores in the United States. And we do not see any complaint, the sales are increasing. The stores are doing very well because the price point, so it actually is helping the community. And what we are seeing is that we are also selling paint online, and the reviews that we are getting where they are saying that they're getting a much better product, much better hide for a 1/3 the price. So yes, there are certain sections where the word recycle creates some kind of I would say a negativity, but there is a very big awareness now about supporting environmental friendly paint. And we do a lot of education and putting promotion material out there that when you buy a recycled paint, you're helping the environment. A gallon of paint can save 13 gallons of water. So there's a lot of effort going on, but the progress is very good, and we see a good future ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so to the sponsor of the bill, since these fees will be set by the business community, they have every reason economically to keep it as low as possible. Is that not the case?
I would say that is the case.
Okay. Yet another example of the business community stepping forward to solve an important problem.
Amen.
Yep. Isn't that so?
Isn't
Any other
that so?
questions? Seeing none, and none of the witnesses who signed up in opposition have signed up to testify, that ends the public hearing on House Bill 255. And bye-bye to 3 of our friends from Economic
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Matters.
Thank you, Chair.
Let's now go to House Bill 310, Delegate Rosenberg, who must be here. There he is. And we welcome now 3 other friends from Economic Matters, Delegates Crosby, Charkoudian, and Pippi. Okay. And the brilliant Bob Smith. Okay. You're up. 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I just heard you correctly, you referred to, on the previous bill, the work that this committee has performed in stepping forward to solve a problem. You've already done this on the issue as well that I bring to you with this bill. That is requiring that a certain percentage of funds be spent in disadvantaged communities. The Clean Water Commerce Act of 2021 does that and sets aside a certain portion, mandates that a certain portion of the money generated by that fund be used in disadvantaged communities. We also have the precedent, the example of Justice 40 at the federal level, where there is a goal of 40% of the funds being set aside for several environmental programs in disadvantaged communities. And that would include job training and workforce development in those communities as well. So what this bill would do is mandate that for certain programs, we do what we already do under the Clean Water Commerce Act, and that is provide that funds, a certain percentage, 40, be set in the bill, be spent in disadvantaged communities so that the benefits, these are communities that the justification, as this committee well knows, those communities have been disproportionately disadvantaged in many instances by environmental practices, mispractices, if I may, of the past. So I would defer to this committee as to which programs, what the percentage is, but I would submit, I would urge you, based on what you've already done with the Clean Water Commerce Act, to use that as a model, this bill as a model, to extend that principle to additional programs that are state-funded programs so that we can remedy the harm that's been done in too many of the communities in our state over the past decades and can address those problems in the future. So I would request favorable consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one witness who signed up virtually. His name is Wesley Stewart. Mr. Stewart, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is Wes Stewart from the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. We're here in full support of House Bill 310. When we look at health and energy disparities around the state, significant disparities occur in low-income neighborhoods who are under-resourced and underrepresented in terms of a lot of the programs that address housing, energy, and health needs. We have over 1,300 children, despite our progress, who have elevated blood levels in Maryland. We have 500,000 Marylanders who have asthma and suffer from asthma triggers in their home. We have seniors who live in homes where they have injury risk that prevent them from aging in place in the communities where they want to live and reside. And when these families and our seniors, when we go to programs to get needs addressed, they often have more than one issue. They have lead hazards, triggers, asthma triggers, weatherization needs. And so we really need to look at how do we best serve families? How do we help them go through the programs to get the services they need? Part of that is a whole home approach where we have integrated services, but we also need to more proportionally spend our housing, energy, and health funds in low-income, underrepresented communities. Those are homes that have suffered from disinvestment, maintenance deferred over many years, and so they often have greater needs. They're often harder for some of our programs to serve. So DAC, MEA, oftentimes, those are more challenging homes, but we really need to make a commitment. And in this case, this bill puts a commitment of 40% of funding to be spent in those homes. They often need more concentrated resources to improve health outcomes, to improve educational outcomes. And so we really ask for this committee to look and support this legislation that will more concentrate our resources to address the more challenging homes and to address the energy burdens. Many of our seniors and families pay 3 to 5 times the amount of their income for energy costs. And so this bill goes a long way to addressing that need to address disparities and also those So again, we ask for your support and a favorable report for House Bill 310.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the sponsor or this witness? What say you from ECM? Okay, well, you did a brilliant job, apparently. There are no questions, and that ends the public hearing on House Bill 310. Off with you, then.
You didn't say off with their heads.
Pardon me?
You didn't say off with their heads.
No, God, no. Oh, no.
That applied to you.
That's right. The brave, right. Okay, so let us now turn to House Bill 253. Delegate Shetty, welcome to Environment and Transportation.
Thank
you have 4 minutes.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's
Yes,
very generous.
I have no doubt that you can wow us in under 4 moments.
I have a sponsor panel. Do you mind if I bring them to you?
Yes, please do.
Okay. sponsor panel join. Thank you. Hi.
Okay.
Okay, I think we might be missing one, but they'll get here when they get here.
Lindsay will get here whenever, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein, colleagues, wonderful colleagues on the incredible House Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Emily Shetty. I am here to respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 253. This bill enables farms to create on-farm composting sites for food, to be able to process clean food scraps of up to 40,000 square feet, which would be an increase from the current limit of 5,000 square feet, but it would bring it into parity with the amount of space available for the composting of manure currently. The returning members of ENT might remember this bill from last year. This is actually identical to the version that passed unanimously in the Senate last session. And we've since taken multiple amendments, working very closely with the stakeholders as well as with the department to try and respond to the feedback that we received. So colleagues, as you know, we've got a really massive food waste problem here in Maryland. We generate 920,000 tons of food waste every single year. And we've passed several policies over the years to increase the way in which we process this and increase incentives for composting. But at this point, only 85% of food scraps are, actually about 85% of food scraps are still incinerated or disposed of in a landfill. But we can do better. We've got lots of amazing large composting sites, including Bioenergy DevCos, as well as an incredible facility in Prince George's County. But even if you are able to tally all of the capacity of our existing facilities, they still wouldn't be able to meet the needs of our entire state's diversion efforts. So right now, we're allowed under existing law and regs up to 40,000 square foot of, for farmers to use to compost manure and food scraps that are generated on their own farm or one that they own. But we limit the amount of square feet used to 5,000 square feet if even a single piece of food scrap from outside is brought in that's not owned by the same farmer. So let's say I go visit a farm, you see their giant compost pile, and I throw my banana peel. Now all of a sudden the farmer is out of compliance with the law. So, you know, we're a state here who wishes to balance environmental benefits of food diversion and composting, but maintaining this large discrepancy between how we treat these two types of processing facilities is just really counterintuitive to those efforts. So you might hear some opponents or read in their testimony that they might say that this legislation grants an exemption for farms to increase composting, but they won't have environmental protections in place to actually provide guardrails. But in response, I actually have kind of a lot to say, but seeing that I am timed, I'll just include that we've had multiple changes from the previously introduced bill last session. We've provided significant added protections over and above existing regulations and law. We are excluding the ability to compost animal carcasses from offsite. We require intense record keeping and as well as working with stakeholders on possible additional guardrails, including limiting on-farm composting facilities from processing industrially produced animal byproducts. We're also working with stakeholders on a sponsor amendment that clarifies that the requirement of mixing the offsite generated waste and the maintenance of records be done by the operator of the facility itself. So with that, I thank the committee for your consideration and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, before I get to the next witness, how many square feet do you want to put it up to?
So the current draft would put it in parity with the on-farm limit for manure. So 40,000 square feet.
40,000,
Yes.
okay, so that's, and currently it's 5,000, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so that's just to put it into perspective, that's 200 by 200 feet squared.
Yep, it's a little less than an acre.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Who'd like to go next? Emily?
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Barve, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action. here in support of House Bill 253. So that 40,000 square feet that Delegate Shetty is talking about, that is what farmers are already allowed to do through this same permit exemption if they are doing manure, yard waste, and on-site food scraps. So this bill isn't doubling that. You're not going to now have 40,000 square feet for manure, 40,000 square feet for food scraps. This is just saying that existing 40,000 square feet that you are already allowed to do, you may now add food scraps to those piles. And this is an incredibly important thing because getting that right mix of greens and browns is important for producing a high quality compost. So last year, me and some of my other allies asked for some additional requirements because we were a little worried about, this is a big increase. Like, how is this going to work? And so the bill language goes above and beyond what farmers already have to do for manure, and it has to be immediately mixed with carbonaceous materials. This is like wood chips. And it has to be incorporated into active composting within 24 hours. So the bill is already designed and set up to make sure that farmers are only accepting the food scraps that they have the capacity and ability to process. Farms already have to comply with nutrient management plans. They have all sorts of various requirements on them to make sure that they are handling nutrients responsibly, and this really fits into the existing requirements that they already have. So thank you so much. We hope that we can get this done to process food scraps, sequester carbon, and get methane out of our landfills. Thank you.
Thank you. Colby, welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Colby Ferguson here on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau. And we support House Bill 253. We think it's a good compromise. I think the bill last year, the farmers might be liked a little better because it didn't have all the reporting in it, but I think after the discussions, it makes sense that we should have some sort of records to show verify what's coming in. So if there was to be any issues or concerns, those records would be made available. So one thing that we have to remember is that there's such a huge push right now, and particularly in the urban counties, to really divert food scraps and food compostables out of the landfill, which in most cases doesn't even go to a landfill in Maryland, goes to another state or is burnt. So this is organic fertilizer for farmers. And so if you look at the price of fertilizer, it's coming down this year, but last year it was roughly about a 300% increase in cost. So having the ability to have a stable fertilizer along with organic matter to help with carbon sequestration and healthy soils fits naturally into a lot of our climate goals and water quality goals. So we encourage the committee to move forward with this. I think there was some thoughts that this would allow DAF or products from the poultry operations to go into. By no means do we want that. That's already a problem amongst itself. So if that needs to have an amendment to clarify that, we have no problem with that as well. So with that, we'd encourage a favorable report on House Bill 253.
Thank you very much. We have two witnesses who are signed up remotely. First is Lindsay Thompson, and we saw her there for a second. Hey, Lindsay, welcome back to the committee.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Thompson, here today on behalf of the Maryland Grain Producers Association in favor of this bill. My colleagues explained well what the bill does and the compromises that have been made. I just wanted to point out one thing. You heard from Maryland Grain Producers President Justin Brendel during the State of Ag that fertilizer prices have increased 276% from pre-COVID numbers. And this composting allows farmers not only to diversify, but also to create some nutrient surety for themselves as farmers. As Colby mentioned, this is an organic nutrient source. And we feel that by allowing food scraps, not only are you diversifying the feedstock for the composting, but you're also providing a service and avoiding those food scraps going into the landfill. So I really feel like this is a mutually beneficial bill, both for the farmers and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Benjamin Fischler with the Sierra Club. Mr. Fischler. There you are.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barve and committee members. I'm Ben Fischler, the composting lead for Maryland Sierra Club's Zero Waste Team, speaking on behalf of more than 70,000 members and supporters of the Maryland Sierra Club. We strongly support House Bill 253. This bill benefits Maryland farmers and Maryland's environment. Expanding the options for on-farm composting will divert food waste from landfills, thus conserving space in our landfills, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and creating green businesses and jobs. This is an important step on the path to zero waste. Now, the current regulations and the proposed changes in this bill have been very well covered by the previous folks. So I'll just move ahead to just point out that HB 253 will produce many environmental and economic benefits related to the diversion of food scraps and the production and use of compost on farms. The Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club respectfully requests a favorable report on HB 253. Thank you.
All right, we have a question from the Vice Chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Delegate, thanks for bringing this bill back. I know you mentioned in your testimony some of the guardrails that have been put into this year's bill, and could you repeat what those are? I remember record keeping and no animal carcasses. Were there others?
Yes, so I actually unfortunately don't have the language with me, and I point you to the exact locations of the guardrails that we added. Do you have a copy of the bill with you?
I do not.
Okay, so we removed the ability to include animal carcasses from off-site. We also added clarity that no liquids could be brought in, because that is often can be very difficult for composting facilities that are not like the Prince George's County or Bioenergy DevCo facilities to manage. We also require, so the record keeping includes a requirement for 3 years to maintain records of all of the compost or compostable materials brought onto the farm, the date, what was brought on, and I know that there was a third piece, the time.
Yeah.
Yes. And then there's also a requirement in there that once items are brought into the farm from offsite, they have to be processed within 24 hours and mixed with dry materials. And as well as, lastly, and I think probably most importantly, for residents who live in the surrounding area of a farm, they also are required to comply with existing regulations around nuisance, around rodents, like protecting against rodent infestation and smell.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Next question goes to Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a cool idea.
Thank you.
But I'm going to ask a crazy question. So,
go for it.
Individuals or restaurants, how do they get their food scraps to the recycling place?
This is a great question. I love this question. So
I'm glad you've heard it before.
So there are a number of different small businesses here in Maryland. One of them is based in my district, Compost Crew, and they act as haulers that privately contract with residences as well as with restaurants or schools. Often will contract with them, or entire municipalities will, to service an area. And they will provide a separate bin for a home or a restaurant or a school to place specific items that can be composted. So not everything. So the person generating the waste is already pre-sorting, basically. So they're standing in front of 3 bins. They put, trash in one place, recycling in one place, and compostable materials in a separate bin. Once a week, the hauler will come and pick up the item and then take it to usually an existing facility. So in Montgomery County, Compost Crew takes a lot of the materials that they have from the eastern part of our county, the southern part of our county, to Prince George's County's really amazing facility. They have one of the best on the East Coast, and then that will be processed there. But they also operate currently under the existing regulations of the 5,000 square foot limit. They lease land from 2 farms in our ag reserve in Montgomery County, and they have small on-farm, on-site processing facilities.
Thank you. Going to follow. What do you do with the compost when it's done?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that happen. So once materials are composted, they become a very nutritious soil amendment. And so right now, farms can utilize that as part of their fertilizer for their crops. With the private service that we pay for, Compost Crew gives us like up to 2 bags of compost a year, and we just use it in our garden. So yeah, for our own vegetables and flowers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That will conclude the public hearing on House Bill 253. Let's now turn to the first two of Delegate Lehman's bills, House Bill 299, Synthetic Turf Chain of Custody. Do you have a panel of folks you want to bring up?
I do, Mr. Chair. I'm going to take care, excuse me, I'm going to take care to avoid touching this button or microphone inadvertently. Yes, I have, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, thank you.
There we go.
Yes, I have Martha Ainsworth and on my panel, as well as Robert Navalis from the Mid-Atlantic Sports Turf Managers Association. Thank you.
Neither of whom are signed up.
I did register.
Is Robert Navalis? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not even looking at the first page. That would explain that. Yes, they're both signed up. Okay, 4 minutes. Take it away, Delegate.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, and my esteemed colleagues. So I am here to request favorable consideration of HB 299, a bill that creates a chain of custody reporting system to establish the location, movement, and disposal of synthetic turf playing fields. This is my 5th year, in case you were wondering, Mr. Chair, working on this legislation, and it will determine where turf playing fields are currently in the ground initially, and then where they go whenever they are moved. The movement of fields most often occurs at the end of the life of a field, and that is typically around the 8 to 10 year mark. This committee passed the bill amended in 2022. It passed the full House, which was a major milestone. The Senate's ENT Committee never voted on the House bill or on the Senate cross-file. So HB 299 requires owners and custodians of synthetic turf fields, and that includes the definition of turf is spelled out in the bill. That includes the actual plastic carpeting, so what you think of as a turf field, the green imitation grass, the infill material that helps the grass sort of stand up, and then the shock pad. And so information would have to be reported to track that to the Maryland Department of Environment for publication on its website. Initially, that will mean that owners will report where those fields are already in the ground. It will include street address, location of the field, brand of the field, size in square feet, weight, and so on. You will hear from Ms. Ainsworth about what she and her volunteers have been able to determine about where those fields are now. And they've done amazing work, but HB 299 will clarify the number that we believe is out there. So if a synthetic turf field is removed after the chain of custody information is established, then the new custodian has to report to MDE the new location and street address, name, contact information of the transporter, size and weight of the field, and so on. For members of ENT, those of you who are new here, and are first hearing about this issue, if you're saying to yourself, well, why does it matter where fields go, and how will knowing that be helpful to us? Those are great questions. And the answer is, and you will hear more from other witnesses, that synthetic turf playing fields create an enormous amount of solid waste. The component parts are mostly artificial, hence the name, and laden with harsh chemicals, including your plastic carpeting, which is a petroleum product, of course, the shock pad, the infill, which is most often shredded tire, and so on.
So knowing where they go at the end of their life or occasionally in the middle of their lives, we believe will create not only greater public information and accountability and awareness, but also lead to increased opportunities for reuse, recycling, and repurposing, is similar to what we heard with the paint disposal bill. So quickly on amendments, the Maryland Association of Counties, on behalf of its recreation members, is requesting some friendly amendments. I'm fine with those, and I'm going to ask MACO or its members to further describe those changes. And then MDE, you will see, submitted a letter of information, and all MDE is asking for is that the penalties be made administrative rather than civil, which is what the bill calls for now. So in closing, Mr. Chairman, I believe a chain of custody approach is workable for owners, field owners, and custodians, and it represents accountability and transparency around these fields and where they go within the state's boundaries during any phase of their life cycle. And I ask for your favorable report.
Yeah, before I recognize the people who are signed up, I want to thank you for your tenacity on this. What became of the bill last year? Refresh my memory.
Last year? Okay, so the bill passed, the committee amended, it passed the full House. The Senate, there was a crossfile in the Senate last year. There is not this year. It was, the Senate crossfile was heard, but never voted on. The House bill made it over well in time before crossover, and the House bill was never taken up.
What committee in the Senate?
The former EHE, and
Okay.
this year it would be the E3 committee that will hear it.
Okay, and, okay, and the bill as it the bill as it is before us right now, is it in the same form it was in when it left the House last year?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the spirit of it is exactly the same. The language is slightly different, I would say, in that it is a cleaner bill. Going back
So
to
the
my first year, it
substance-
was very awkwardly drafted, but it is the same.
So the substance is the same as
Substance
what
is
we
the same. The
passed?
reporting requirement is the same.
Okay, who would like to go next?
I'll go first. I guess.
Okay, Mr. Napolis.
Yep. Good afternoon, Chairman Kumar Arve and members of the Environmental Committee. For the record, my name is Robert Navalis, and I am here today representing the Mid-Atlantic Sports Field Managers Association, MASFMA, and the Maryland Turfgrass Council, MTC. For the committee's consideration and review, we have also submitted our written testimony. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about the testimony or about us. As a supporter of this legislation last session, we would like to take this opportunity to thank the sponsor for reintroducing it. Our organizations support the passage of House Bill 299, Environment Synthetic Turf Chain of Custody. As written, this bill requires the Maryland Department of the Environment, MDE, to establish a system to track the chain of custody of synthetic turf installed on sports and playing fields in the state. MASFMA and MTC represent members in the fields of sports turf managers, landscapers, golf, solid producers, and commercial and residential lawn care services. Our members develop and maintain safe and aesthetically pleasing fields for schools, universities, parks and recs departments throughout the state and the Mid-Atlantic region. We believe that House Bill 299 is taking a critical step forward in enacting transparency and accountability for those responsible for the removal, transportation, disposal, and acceptance of synthetic turf. For Maryland, this bill would mitigate or prevent the risk of illegal dumping. The transparency of this bill allows end users to better understand the investments they have to make up front and the long-term cost, as well as potentially protecting them from future liability. In conclusion, we respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report of House Bill 299. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ainsworth.
Good afternoon, Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein, and committee members. I'm Martha Ainsworth. I'm the chair of the Zero Waste team of the Maryland Sierra Club. On behalf of 70,000 members and supporters of the Maryland Sierra Club, we'd like you to please support HB 299. The bill addresses a serious waste problem posed by the lack of transparency and accountability for disposal of synthetic turf. Since last session, the Sierra Club volunteers have updated our inventory of synthetic turf fields in Maryland to estimate their waste when they're replaced. As of this January, we found 398 synthetic turf playing fields in 19 counties and Baltimore City. It's about 50 more since this time last year. We were able to estimate the size of 378 of them, and using the characteristics of an average 80,000 square foot playing field cited by the Synthetic Turf Council, we calculated their weight and volume when they're replaced over the next decade, since they last about 10 years. These fields will generate more than 74,000 tons of plastic carpet and infill, nearly 135,000 cubic yards of infill, the equivalent of more than 4,460 30-yard dumpsters, and 26.7 million square feet of plastic carpet. That's about 612 acres. Now, this is a projection of the waste that will be generated when the fields are replaced. Like I said, we haven't been able to document the fate of those who've already been removed, whether they've been reused, repurposed, stockpiled, landfilled, or dumped, and more are being approved every day. The complete results of the inventory are attached to our written testimony. So, in concluding, the Synthetic Turf Council's guidelines recommend a chain of custody, but it must be mandatory and it must be publicly disclosed. The Sierra Club respectfully requests a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a number of people who are signed up to testify remotely, and the first is Diana Conway. Diana, welcome to the Environment and Transportation Committee. You have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Lehman, for introducing 299 again on the chain of custody. My name is Diana Conway. I'm president of the Montgomery County Women's Democratic Club, one of the largest, most active Democratic clubs in the state. My written testimony is submitted. Unfortunately, because of my personal tech challenges, it defeated my footnotes, which include video from prior year's hearings with a few of you taking star turns on Q&A, but I'd be happy to provide that, and if it's permissible, I'd like to just add those as an amendment to my written testimony. Anyway, I'm here to ask that you send House Bill 299 to the full House with as much support as possible. The goal of this bill is simple: transparency, and the mechanism is very simple. Tell MDE where you got your field, where it is now, and then tell MDE whenever you move it and who's taking it. We just want to make sure that used synthetic turf fields are managed responsibly and transparently anytime they're moved. The fields are worth tracking because of both their volume and their contents. Each one is several hundred tons of heavy, bulky, mixed plastics, not recyclable anywhere in the US. And we know from years of uncontested research they contain very concerning chemicals, carcinogens, endocrine disruptors, heavy metals, PFAS, plus the microplastic debris from this material if it is not managed. So the custodians, as defined, just have to tell MDE where they got their field, where it is now, and then when it moves, tell MDE who the next custodian is. That's all. There are no fees, there's no approval, there's no permitting, just upload a few facts and you're done. So I hope the committee will see fit to send it off to the full House as you did last year, and this time we're going to get through the Senate as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be delighted to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Let's turn now to Marie Laporte. Marie, welcome to the committee if you're with us.
I am.
Okay, terrific. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barve and members of the committee. My name is Marie Laporte. I'm a Marylander who has resided in Baltimore County for about 28 years. I'm speaking today in support of HB 299, synthetic turf chain of custody. My county has more synthetic turf fields than any other in the state, with over 60 fields at 45 different sites across the county. The estimated 440,000 pounds of waste associated with each field means that my county alone can generate over 26 million pounds of waste every 8 to 10 years from synthetic turf, in a county with a single landfill that is expected to reach capacity in 2025. Further, these synthetic turf fields are frequently dumped on private property, as occurred in White Marsh, Maryland, when a field was transported with no oversight or precautions from Montgomery County. The tire crumb was all over the place with absolutely no containment in an area near a watershed that had recently been expensively remediated. The tire material frequently used in synthetic turf fields contains a toxic brew of hazardous chemicals that would classify them as hazardous waste if they were to be landfilled as tires. But once tires are ground up on a synthetic turf field, they are permitted to be disposed of with no oversight. Highly respected scientists from top academic and health-based institutions regularly publish on the hazards of chemicals found in synthetic turf. I am also among one of the many Marylanders that relies on a well, roughly 1 in 7, which is part of a large aquifer, and I use that well for water consumption, cooking, bathing, and other uses. I'm concerned that disposal of these materials is both unregulated and potentially hazardous. At a minimum, we need to be able to track the location of these fields to protect our water quality. I urge you to provide a favorable report for HB 299. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's turn now to Amanda Farber. Amanda, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barve and members of the committee. My name is Amanda Farber, and I'm pleased to testify today on behalf of Safe Healthy Playing Fields, Inc., which is a grassroots nonprofit organization based in Montgomery County, Maryland, and includes volunteer partners and advocates across the country. Safe Healthy Playing Fields strongly supports HB 299. So our organization has testified in Annapolis for several years now regarding the need for greater transparency and accountability regarding the end-of-use management and disposal of artificial turf fields. During that time, the proposed legislation has been thoughtfully refined, and also during that time, there have been more and more examples and evidence as to why this legislation is so critically needed. All artificial turf fields have limited lifespans. The industry itself has acknowledged that the growing number of worn-out artificial turf fields present an enormous amount of material to be handled, but it has often not been forthcoming about what actually happens to that material. The Synthetic Turfs Council's own published guidelines, which I've got right here, include recommendations and multiple theoretical examples of chain of custody reporting, but there's no real world required accountability. Advocates and officials who have asked industry representatives basic questions about end-of-life disposal or recycling of artificial turf fields are often met with vague or greenwashed or non-answers. My favorite response to a simple question of where a worn-out field from here in Montgomery County was that it was going away. And my second favorite answer was that it was going somewhere in Malaysia, but we won't tell you where. The world is waking up to the problems and proliferation of plastic pollution. HB 299 is neither punitive nor prohibitive. It's about best practices, and we ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It appears that I forgot to call up Laura Stewart, who is, I was thinking I don't see you out there, but there you are. So come on up, Laura, and my apologies. It's our practice to call up in-person witnesses first. So in any case, welcome back to the committee, and you have 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I did not realize I had another in-person witness.
Pardon me?
I said I apologize, I did not realize I had another in-person witness, so that was my mistake.
My boo-boo, really. Go ahead.
It was my turn to be in person today. Good afternoon. My name is Laura Stewart. Thank you for having me here. I am speaking on behalf of the Free State PTA, representing over 500 Maryland public schools. A founding principle of Free State PTA's mission is to promote the safety and well-being of all children and youth, which includes a healthy environment. We support HB 299. This bill simply requires the producers of synthetic turf fields to do one thing: supply the Maryland Department of Environment with an update whenever a field is moved. School systems continue to install plastic fields, and there are over 90 plastic fields in Maryland public schools today. As good stewards of the environment, we owe it to future generations to track where this mix of mixed plastics, heavy metals, carcinogens, endocrine disruptors, and PFAS land at the end of their lifespan. The Free State PTA legislative agenda states that we support reducing exposure to known harmful substances, including lead and PFAS, in home, play, and school environments by testing and remediating in paints, plumbing, drinking water, and athletic fields and play surfaces. We also added a sustainability agenda this year after hearing from parents and students how important the environment is to them. It states that we support reducing plastic use and healthy environments by using natural play surfaces and natural grass fields. The least we can do as adults is track the location of this artificial turf field waste so that we may mitigate the potential damage to our environment, especially our waterways. Why shouldn't we expect it to be managed responsibly? The industry acknowledges the amount of material is enormous and that plastic turf has not always been disposed of responsibly. Future generations depend on us to deal with this now. Therefore, we recommend HB 299 receive a favorable report.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Let's go back now to virtual witnesses. Diana Zuckerman. Diana, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thanks so much.
Oh, terrific. Welcome to the committee, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of HB 299. I'm Dr. Diana Zuckerman, president of the National Center for Health Research, which is a nonprofit think tank incorporated in Maryland. I'm speaking on behalf of our research center and as a longtime resident of Maryland. My perspective is as a scientist trained in epidemiology and public health and the former chair of the Women's Health Promotion Council for the state of Maryland. Our research center conducts, scrutinizes, and explains research with important public health implications for adults and children. We're nationally respected as a source of unbiased information, and we don't accept funding from entities with a financial interest in our work. This bill is important because it would require transparency. And by enabling the public to be informed about the chain of custody from the time of installation through disposal, the bill would ensure that individuals, policymakers, and communities could make informed decisions that are essential to the health of adults and children in our state. We urge the immediate passage of this bill because the current lack of transparency has made it impossible to make informed decisions. I speak from experience on this. Synthetic turf became popular while my children were playing soccer while growing up in Maryland. And like most parents, I was unaware of the environmental or health issues involved. As I became knowledgeable, I was shocked by the widespread misinformation regarding the disposal of these materials. Please improve transparency and help Maryland communities determine how synthetic turf and infill are being used and what happens to those products when they are removed. Strongly urge your favorable report. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next, Jerry Garson. Jerry, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Good afternoon, Delegate Barber and other committee members. I am Jerry Garson, speaking on behalf of the Montgomery County Civic Federation, Inc., which represents about 150,000 Montgomery County residents. The Montgomery County Civic Fed considered Bill HB 299, Environment Synthetic Turf Chain of Custody. The Civic Federation unanimously voted in favor of the legislation for the following reasons. This legislation would require the Maryland Department of Environment to establish a system to track the chain of custody of synthetic turf sports or playing fields installed in Maryland. These fields contain dangerous materials. The basic point is that we just want to know where these things went and the materials were disposed of properly. This is about transparency. The fiscal and policy note indicates only a $52,400 cost for fiscal year 2024 and only a $13,800 cost for fiscal year 2025. Last year, the bill was HB 131 and it passed the House of Delegates by a vote of 97 to 34. We ask for a favorable report on this bill. The mission of the Montgomery County Civic Federation is to preserve and improve the quality of life of all the current and future residents of the county. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Garson. And the final purely favorable witness is going to be Kathleen Michaels, and then we will go to questions, and then after that, we will go to favorable with amendments, and then finally unfavorable. So, Dr. Kathleen Michaels, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I'm Dr. Kathleen Michaels, testifying on behalf of One Montgomery Green, and thank you very much for having us here today. One Montgomery Green is a grassroots nonprofit with a mission to catalyze transition to a sustainable economy, facilitate environmental responsibility among businesses, residents, and government, and to increase the quality of life for all Montgomery County residents. We have many on-the-ground programs working with the community, students, and local scientists on environmental issues, including plastic waste. One Montgomery Green strongly supports the goals and intent of, I seem to have lost, am I still on?
You're still on.
Oh, okay, my screen went dark, okay. So I'll just keep talking.
We can see
the
you.
goals and intent of HB 0299. It should not be up to volunteers to inventory the sites of these huge carpets and to track down where they are disposed. Tracking and tracing of this waste needs to be statewide, since the counties can't be counted on to create their own systems, and since carpet and infill waste may be transported to any other part of the state. Indeed, this has been an issue of policy concern in Montgomery County, as well as grassroots concern for over a decade. In 2011, the Solid Waste Committee of the Montgomery County government published their own partial inventory for the county, and noted that most fields were difficult to track down for inventory or waste management because most were in private hands. The government warned against, the committee warned against a coming flood of synthetic turf carpeting waste that would overwhelm county landfill capacity, and recommended that an inventory and management system be put in place. However, at about the same time, the county shut down its landfill and began to send most of its waste to landfills in Virginia and the county incinerator. The recommendations of the committee were ignored and forgotten because the synthetic turf waste was being trucked by various entities out of sight and out of mind to other counties in Maryland. So we strongly support HB 299 for accountability of this huge amount of waste.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's go to some questions. First goes to Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Delegate Lehman, for your persistence in bringing this bill back and for all your work with the stakeholders to try to get the details just right. And so this is just a reporting requirement, right? There's no requirement about what they have to do with the field, just that they report what they did with it. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So it's reporting, and the initial phase is where are those fields now? Where are they installed? What kinds of fields? I went through the list, the size, the weight, and all of that. And then thereafter, it is, future installations of new fields or replacement fields, but also when they are moved for any reason, whether they are moved, which is not often the case, but whether they are moved from one site to another to, maybe they're halfway through, a field's halfway through its life or less, and that organization or entity decides that they are no longer need that field for whatever reason. Maybe it's a decision by athletes or parents or other users that, we're not pleased with this product, put it somewhere else. That happens occasionally, though not often. It's mostly trying to get at where the fields go at the end of their lives. That's most often going to be the case. And we just don't know, because absent any rules or regulations or laws, really anywhere in this country, the best guess is that they go to, most of them go to landfills. However, they could be stockpiled on private property, and there are definitely some cases of illegal dumping.
So the custodian is responsible for that reporting, that's correct? And so would the custodian be the school, say, where it's installed, or the?
Right, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, who's responsible for the reporting? It's the custodian, right?
It's two different categories. I'm glad you asked about that. So it's defined on page 2 of the bill. The reporters are custodians, and the definition of custodian is a person that accepts delivery of a field or the party that removes, transports, or actually disposes of the turf. But it is also, in that initial phase, going to be current owners of fields. Those might be school systems, recreation departments, colleges and universities, private clubs, that will tell MDE where they are in the ground right now, when they were installed, the brand, and so on and so forth, to get that base sort of amount of information that we do not have now. We know what we know through the work of Martha Ainsworth and her volunteers, but otherwise we would have no idea. And we don't know how many more there are and what they've been able to catalog, which I believe she said is right around the 400 mark. But we will know eventually. And that's the idea.
Thank you so much. May I ask one more question, Mr. Chair? Thank you. And so I didn't know if you'd had a chance to look at the testimony from the Synthetic Turf Council and if you wanted to address that.
I did. They sent me those concerns in writing. I know you'll be hearing from a representative. I did offer, I challenge them to say, if you have issues, one of them is with the definition of custodian. There are 3 concerns. The second one, which has been the same deadline in the bill the last, I think, 3 years, that initial phase of reporting on fields in the ground, they think is unrealistic. My response to that is, how do owners of these fields not know where they are? Of course they know where they are. They keep their own inventory, school systems, recreation departments. That's probably the easiest part of the reporting requirement. I don't think January of 2024 is too soon to do that. And they're concerned about how a custodian is defined. I forget the third concern, but I said to them, if you're willing to put forward amendments, I will consider those. And I did not get the sense they were willing to take me up on that.
Thank you so much.
Next question goes to Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Lehman, thank you for, as Delegate Ruth said, thank you for your persistence in continuing to introduce this important legislation until we get it passed. Since you've been working on this issue and been introducing this legislation, do you know if any other states have adopted regulations regarding artificial turf?
Thank you. That is a great question. So up through last year, each of the 4 previous years, one of the main features of my testimony had been that turf is not regulated that we can tell anywhere in the United States, and we've done pretty extensive research over the years. My staff, my committed interns, the legislative library certainly has helped with that. And up until this year, the only jurisdiction that had any rules whatsoever was New York City, and that was through regulations, and they weren't even formal written regulations, but it was through their procurement rules, where as part of procuring, putting out an RFP for a new synthetic turf field, anyone bidding on that RFP had to say what its plans would be at the end of the life of the field. And that was something that evolved over time. I've actually had conversations in the past with New York City officials. That was it, nationwide. What has just changed is that the state of New York in January has signed, the governor signed into law a piece of legislation that requires carpet manufacturers to establish collection programs to recycle discarded and unused carpeting, a little bit like the paint bill we just heard. But part of that bill significantly addresses and bans certain toxins in carpeting, this kind of carpeting, household carpeting, what you think of as carpet. But there's a whole section of that law that the governor just signed that bans PFAS, which we've heard about in this committee, not only in carpeting, but in synthetic turf. There's a whole section of that law on turf. So New York now becomes the first state to specifically address turf. So thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, do you have any data on player injuries on these synthetic fields as opposed to regular fields?
So Delegate Siliberti, over the years, I have been asked health-related questions about synthetic turf fields, and there are endless studies and data, including by the NFL Players Association and other advocates for athletes. I really do not have expertise in that topic. I realize these issues, that there is some nexus around public health and the environment that's clear. I do not have that information. I'm willing to follow up and get it. I believe there are other witnesses, Mr. Chairman. If you're interested in that answer here and now, I'm almost certain that that Diana Conway has that information because she's been involved for so many years with this issue.
Okay, I'll entertain this for a brief question because it's really not specifically relevant to the bill, but since you have an answer and a committee member asked it, go ahead, Diana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the question. The answer is yes. There's a higher rate of injury on synthetic turf field according to multiple peer-reviewed published studies. And in prior years on prior bills, we've actually been joined at the dais by the orthopedic surgeon for the Ravens, who also comes along to pre-debunk the miscategorizations by the industry regarding injury rates. So basically, the real science says there's a higher rate of injury even on the best synthetic turf money can buy. So imagine what's in your park or your high school. And the fact that the industry feels compelled to hire a non-medical doctor to recast their research and try to pass it off as a, quote, study tells you a little bit about how far they're reaching. We can also talk about heat injuries, the high school football injury rate. The October Sports Illustrated cover story was about synthetic turf and heat and fatalities among high school football players, especially Black football players who are at higher risk. And of course, concussions, because these fields get so hard. But as the chairman pointed out, this is about disposal, not injury.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much. Let's proceed now to the people who are signed up favorable with amendments. The first is Shannon Nazal. And she will be followed by Kevin Canali with Mako. So Kevin, if you could come up and be on deck. If you're here, that would be great. If you're not here, then never mind. Oh, there he is. Okay. Shannon, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Barve and committee members. For the record, I'm Shannon Nazal, and I'm here representing the Maryland Association of County Parks and Recreation Administrators, or MACPRA, which is the Mako Parks and Recreation affiliate. MACPRA is in support of House Bill 299 with amendments. As a professional association of agencies responsible for providing safe facilities and activities for Maryland residents, MACPRA supports the general purpose of House Bill 299, establishing a statewide inventory of synthetic turf fields through a chain of custody system. MACPRA promotes the safe use, reuse, and/or disposal of synthetic turf materials, and a statewide inventory could assist in this effort. MACPRA does have concern that language included in the bill with specific reference to turf infill material, weight requirements, and specific oversight requirements require more clarification. Rubber infill material found on athletic fields tends to migrate, particularly in heavy use areas and jurisdictions with current synthetic turf facilities may not have information on weight of products upon installation that has already occurred. Additionally, we feel that more clarification is needed on the reporting process to ensure the intent of the legislation is met. And we do appreciate the opportunity that we had to speak with Delegate Lehman regarding these concerns and support the addition of amendments that were provided in written testimony to resolve these into the bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Kevin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Kevin Canali here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties. I won't repeat the great testimony by MACPRA. It submitted the same amendments, and I just want to thank Delegate Lehman. This is a multi-year issue, and we really appreciate the chance to work with her and have our concerns addressed. But with those friendly amendments, we're in support of House Bill 299, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the following previous witnesses? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let's go to the two opponents to the bill, Kenneth Curtin and Melanie Taylor. Melanie, would you like to go first?
Yes, happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the committee. My name is Melanie Taylor, and I'm the President and CEO of the Synthetic Turf Council. We've outlined our primary issues with House Bill 299 in our written testimony, but today I want to focus on what we agree on and what may help to make the bill, should it become law, more clear and enforceable. And so first, we agree that this bill encourages sustainability and proper end-of-life handling of synthetic turf systems. We believe that the most effective way to track a synthetic turf field is by identifying one responsible party at each point along in the chain. So currently as written, the definition of custodian possibly applies to 3 different parties, which may cause some confusion and possible duplication in reporting. Second, we agree that transparency and accountability are necessary, and this will be achievable when the expectations are specific and measurable. And so for that reason, we are recommending a minimum of a 75,000 square foot threshold, which is the standard size of a sports field, as part of the definition of synthetic turf, again, as a clear, distinctive, quantitative threshold for new installations. And finally, we recommend extending the reporting deadline, and as the industry trade association, we offer our help to the Maryland Department of the Environment as they devise the new framework, including when and how a field is reported. I welcome the opportunity to meet with committee members to discuss how our industry continues to ensure that synthetic turf systems are a safe and sustainable solution when grass is not an option. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Before I go on to the next witness, what was it? What was the minimum you wanted us to consider?
75,000 square feet, and that is the standard size of a sports field, and that would again apply to new installations.
So, okay, let's go to the next witness, Kenneth Curtin.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Kenneth Curtin. I'm testifying on behalf of the Recycled Rubber Coalition, which represents rubber recyclers and companies that use recycled rubber products in their products. We, as an organization, have sustainability at the core, and we are committed to increasing the recycling of rubber and the use rates of recycled rubber. As you know, one of the many uses of recycled rubber is infill for synthetic turf, and that is what brings us here today. We have 3 suggested changes to the bill that we believe are within the intent of the legislation. First, similar to the Synthetic Turf Council, we suggest including a minimum square footage threshold. Without one, the bill potentially subjects owners of small pieces of turf to the reporting requirements and the fines that are outlined in the legislation. Second, the bill can benefit from a clear definition of custodian. As currently written, the definition of custodian could result in multiple parties reporting on the same turf at the same time. And finally, we recommend either extending the implementation date or providing the Maryland Department of Environment more flexibility on the timing. And as always, we would love to work with the committee on this legislation or any other legislation that has a focus on increasing recycling in Maryland.
Okay, before I get to the questions, about that 75,000 square foot, I mean, the square root of that is 273 feet, which means 100 yards one way and 100 yards the other way. That appears to me to be substantially bigger than a football field. I don't think that a football field is 100 yards wide, is it? Okay. Okay, well, all right. First question goes to Delegate Boyce.
Thank you. The chair somewhat took my question, but I'm going to try to elaborate on it. And so you want the threshold to be 75,000 square feet, but are there fields that are installed that are more than 75,000 square feet? And if so, what?
So that in that case, that would be probably a multi-field complex.
Right.
So you're having multiple fields together, and that would be a larger application.
And is it fair to say that for certain schools, and to your point, without grass or ability to have multiple complexes, they would usually have a multi-sport field?
Correct.
Correct. And so, and those tend to be how many square feet?
To my knowledge, it's about 75 to 80,000 square feet average sports field.
So would it not be fair then to increase the threshold to capture those multi-sport fields?
Yeah, we're simply asking for a minimum threshold because there's not one in the current bill. So it would it would include those. Yes.
Okay, so then let me go opposite. What case for certain schools that could potentially have more fields would it be less? And what type of field?
Typically, a practice field can be the same size, arguably. It might be a different size.
So
It
the
depends
question
on their
is,
land space.
are there fields that are under 75,000 square feet? And if so, what type of sport fields are those? And are those typically installed, whether it's a college campus or a high school?
Those would typically be practice fields, and if they're, say, half the size of the field, that might be where the marching band practices or other activities are held there.
And what is that square footage?
The square footage, I can't. I'll come back to you on that. I promise,
me?
because we actually have an awards program, and we categorize 75 square foot or above and 75 below.
Right.
So I can give you some examples of below.
Because I mean, if I'm a school that in most cases have the ability to have multi-sport complexes, you've got somebody playing, you got somebody on a field, or in some cases you've got intramural fields that tend to be those type of fields. So I would like that number, because I think to the sponsor's point, it needs to be all encompassing, because we want to know where all these turfs go. And then can you speak a little bit more about custodian? I had the question earlier, but I thought I'd just wait on it.
So currently, I believe, and I don't have the bill text in front of me, but there's the person delivering or accepting the delivery of the turf. And in most cases, when we're talking about sports fields, 99.9% of the time, the owner is working with a licensed architect, and they're a design professional. And so they are representing the owner, specifying the field. They're involved in the permitting process. And so they may be the actual person who is technically accepting delivery, because they, upon delivery, when a field is being installed, they're ensuring that the product that is delivered is what was specified. So that's one. The second was a transporter. We see that as that could be a producer, that could be an independent contractor. And so they are a temporary holder of the field, which we feel like they should still be reported in the chain, just like the installer, but they're not the actual custodian. So we would identify the custodian. I think is the second, number two, from my memory definition, which is the property owner of where the turf exists. So, yes.
Yeah, so, thank you for that, but it also sounds like to me, and maybe that's something we can get clarified, it sounds like we want anybody who touches it, even if it's 5 different people who touch the same a turf, somehow to record it, so that in the case of, I guess, what's been happening, you'd have a record if down the line, person number 4 who touched it is the person who does something environmentally not necessarily safe. And so wouldn't you agree with that?
We agree that one party should be responsible for the actual reporting. And that would include all of the players and all of the contractors and anyone involved in the process. So
or
yes,
rather
everyone
anyone who can essentially say, I made it, and then I gave it to the chairman, and then the chairman put it on Delegate Holmes's property. So that to me is, I made it, I gave it, and it's his property. So
and then his property, he would be the new custodian.
Right, okay, I think we can work through that, but I think everybody who touches it should have to report something, so there is some commonality. And then last question I had, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, is about the infill. You mentioned that it is recycled material. Is it fair to say that in the disposal of a field, that infill can also be recycled again?
So I would say the complicated answer is it varies by the state of the infill. You need to evaluate it and make sure it still has the properties that provide, the protection on the field and help the grass stand up. But the short answer is yes, in many cases it can be recycled. Normally, essentially think of a giant vacuum and then cleaned and then can be used again.
And then just to quickly follow up, so that stuff tends to have an end of life, and if you've created it to be put on one field, it sounds like that is then the end of its life. Like you wouldn't go up and try to vacuum up all that stuff, clean it, and then use it for something else.
Yeah, you might actually reuse it for if you were having a new turf field installed to replace an old one. You might actually reuse it. Yes.
And do you actually do that?
Do I do that?
Does your company actually recycle the infield from old?
I believe that would probably be architects and people who install fields. who
Some do,
handle that.
yeah. I mean, their own, and that needs to be what we have, what we put in our guideline. That is under transparency to the owner, so that they know that this product is coming out, it's going to be cleaned and evaluated and tested, and then let's talk about if it's good enough to go back in. So that's a conversation that needs to go through the owner and the design professional. Yes.
Thank you.
Next question goes to Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your testimony. My question is to both of you. You submitted your testimony unfavorable, but it almost seems more like favorable with amendments. If your 3 concerns were addressed, would you support this legislation?
We are looking for a way to get to a yes.
Yes, I think the timeline worked against us. Unfortunately, we were only able, because of scheduling and rescheduling, able to talk to the sponsor Monday afternoon. And so we hadn't gotten to the point where we can agree on legislative text, but I think, we're looking for something we can all agree on.
Great, thank you.
Next question goes to Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I appreciate your testimony. And although this committee is very, very mathematically inclined, as you figure out later on, and although this doesn't include stoichionomy calculations, it is, in fact, a mathematical calculation. We're just trying to figure it out. You indicated 75,000 square feet. And, I looked up the dimensions of a football field, which is 160 feet times 360 feet, which is 57,600 square feet. So where is the extra 17,400 square feet that you're looking for to get up to 75,000 square feet?
I will love to follow up with you on that. My quick answer, my best guess, without doing the math, would be the perimeter of the field. So the area where the benches and, outside of the zones. Is that part of the calculation?
Okay. All right, if you could get back to us and
I'd love to get back to
try
you
to get us some more specifics. Sure. And what are you trying to get to? I'd appreciate that.
I was going to say, I'm not an expert on the size of the fields themselves, but somebody earlier had raised the issue of infill migration, and oftentimes that's one of the reasons that there's transition zones on the side to make sure that the infill for players coming off the field stays on the field rather than going further out.
And that's a fair answer. We just want to make sure that what you're asking for, this makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next question goes to Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Chairman Brave, as you're now dubbed. Vice Chair Strong, I guess, stepped out. I'm sort of picking up a little bit on what Delegate Holmes was putting down. I was kind of thinking along the same lines. But first of all, thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for being so constructive with your concerns. I feel like we're very close to kind of a kumbaya moment here where we can all rally around the bill. But it seems like this square footage minimum is kind of what we're missing here. And so, I read the initial testimony from the Recycled Rubber Coalition, noting that, the concern about the example that was given about these small pieces of turf, right, was a dog groomer who has an indoor play area. So during the, which that seems reasonable to me, right? Like a dog groomer, indoor play area, that does seem small. That doesn't necessarily seem like we should hit them with a bunch of reporting requirements. I kind of get that. So I've spent the hearing Googling indoor dog groomers, and I've found at least 12 of them that have these indoor play areas. We've got 3 Happy Tails, we've got Skip Town, we've got Rovervelt, which I don't have any animals, but Rovervelt actually sounds pretty great. We've got the Paw Spa Pet Resort. These all have these indoor play areas for groomers. Not all of them list the square footage of their indoor play areas, but some of them do in kind of a bragging way that it's so luxurious. The range here I'm seeing is 600 square feet on the low end to 1,600 square foot at the largest. And there seems like a pretty big difference between 1,600 square feet and 75,000 square feet. So I'm wondering if there's any wiggle room to come down closer to the size of an actual, the example y'all gave, the dog groomer, and maybe a little further away from the size of an extremely large football field.
Can I respond
to that? The question that was my testimony.
It was his testimony, but
either one. Yeah, either one.
My honest answer is that is something we know that this bill came about with the removal and transportation of sports fields. And so that's what we want to establish as what we say is a standard size of a sports field. So if we're going to start at a number, that's where we want to start. If we want to meet in the middle, I'd love to have some conversations about that.
And I think probably to the spirit of your question, because one, I don't believe that is the intent of the legislation, and we heard feedback that, you know, it mentions playing fields, and that's what it is, playing fields. One of the pieces of feedback we got when we asked our members and we consult other people who are not our members was that statutorily, I'm probably using the language wrong, there is no definition in law of what a playing field was. So figuring out how can we add protections to make sure that what the reporting requirements in this actually target who the bill is trying to target, rather than, you know, whether it's, you know, I don't know, a driving range or, you know, a batting cage practice, or, you know, using indoor or turf for indoor play areas.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate that, because I also, following up on Delegate Holmes, I never played football, just to be clear. I'm sure I know that's going to shock a lot of you, because I look like such a good football player. But so I hope y'all were sitting down for that. It looks like everyone in the entire room was sitting down, so I'm glad that you were before I made that announcement. But I have watched a lot of football, so I anticipated this sideline issue, so I actually looked up that as well. And so on TrueMarkAthletics.com, they actually talk about the ideal dimensions for an entire football field, including the sidelines, the space for the teams on each side of the field to stand, and also you need a little bit of room past the end zone, because as y'all, as I'm sure have seen, you need some room for players to, you know, go through the end zone, do their dances, etc. And usually it's about apparently 12 feet on each side of the sidelines, including about 8 feet, but some people would disagree and actually say you need 12 on each of the end zones too. So if you add that to Delegate Holmes' calculations, which I also got, the 360 plus 24 on each side, 12 on each side, it would be 24. So you got 384, right? And then on 160 on the short side of the field, you'd also add 24, right? So for 184, and you multiply 384 times 184. Fortunately, Google is great at these math. I couldn't do that math in my head. You actually get 70,656 square feet. So I think even if you include generous dimensions for a sideline and on each end zone, we're still short of the 75,000. So I would just urge you to please reconsider that number, because I feel like we would actually be completely obliterating the intent of the bill if we went that high.
Yeah, and also you got to assume that you need some space for the big vat of Gatorade that you dump on the head of the coach. So
that's true. No, it's true. We may have to add 1 or 2 feet for the Gatorade, but I think even
I think that's inside the 12
okay.
foot, you know.
Even if we did add like a Gatorade circle, we'd still be short of 75,000. But anyway, I appreciate y'all's time. You get the point. I think maybe something closer to the dog groomer and further away from like the largest football field on the planet would be ideal.
Agreed. Thank
As Delegate Holmes said, I'm very impressed by the mathematical abilities of this committee.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You'll probably find the largest collection of liberal mathematicians in the entire legislature in here. Next question goes to Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I'd like to distance myself from the mathematic ability of this committee, because I have zero mathematic ability. However, my question also goes to the dimensions of the field and how you came up with 75,000 square feet. And my question is, that was explored by Delegate Stewart and Delegate Holmes and others. My question is, if someone has more than one field, would each field be considered in the 75,000 minimum, or would it be an aggregate of the 75,000 minimum? So you may have a football field, for example, that doesn't reach the 75,000 square foot or 75,000 square foot requirement, and then you may also have a practice field. The school may also have a practice field, and as a custodian of that artificial turf, is it your intention to aggregate all of that or separate it? Could I claim 2 exemptions, for example, to the minimum, or would I be required to report my synthetic turf?
Yeah, I would say depending on what the minimum threshold is, and because those 2 fields are specified possibly at different times, I would see that those are probably 2 different reports. or reportings. And that might help clarify, I hope, and not combined as one. If you have a practice field that's separate from a sports, I would see that as two different reporting.
Okay, thank you. And then back to the indoor dog play park or dog grooming versus the football field. Is there any difference in the composition of the synthetic turf in either of those venues?
Yes, we see landscape and recreation as one market and one application, but there are many applications in that area. You have rooftops, front yards, dog parks. So those may have different characteristics. You're also looking at different price points, different aesthetics. And then on the sports field side, yes, you'll typically see a much longer yarn, longer fiber, because the infill takes up a portion of that length. And so yes, different construction, different characteristics.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before I recognize the last question, people ask me, I've been here for quite a while in the legislature, and people ask me, what is the real difference between the legislature today versus the early 1990s? And I think the difference is that when Delegate Vaughan Stewart started talking about indoor dog grooming, a committee in the 1990s would have had many members and witnesses start to bark and yelp and whine and, so I have to say, I sort of miss that. I sort of miss that. Delegate Noraki. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. So I'm going to take another bite at this 75,000 number because I'm really trying to wrap my head around it as well. So what would stop someone then from, if we set the number at 75,000 or whatever the number is, 60,000, 50,000, whatever it is, what would stop someone from designing a field then to be at 74,500 square feet to just be shy of that requirement?
I feel like that the design specification, that process that an owner goes through to, first of all, decide whether or not synthetic turf is right for them, right for the application. It's within their budget. There's so much thought and so much, communication between that. So, the field itself comes down to what is it going to be used for? How many people are going to be using it? How often? And, that's all of the very comprehensive and complex, discussions, very technical that go into it. So, I would say, an incentive to not report is, I would hope, be at the very bottom of the list, because there are so many other things that need to be accounted for that field and how it's going to serve the schools and the users. Reporting, again, on the sports field side, designers go through very hefty levels of permitting. So I would think it would be almost part of that process to do this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does that answer?
It's an answer.
I hope
Thank you.
so. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 299. Let's go now to House Bill 365, also Delegate Lehman, a bill that has no opposition. No opposition.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. And it is a cats and dogs bill, so maybe we'll hear some barking.
We will bark. We will totally bark and meow.
Remember our ENT song, Cats and Dogs and Cars and Bikes? There's never time enough. For the veterans of this committee. Okay, let me switch, make sure I have the right bill binder in front of me. And, Delegate Ruth, I'm so glad you took a seat beside me. I do have, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I have enough seats just yet, but Delegate Ruth and I are co-proposers of this legislation, and so I do want to ask, and if there aren't enough chairs, we can rotate them. So Lisa Radoff, who is to my right, but my panel also includes Cindy Sharpley from Last Chance Animal Rescue, Jennifer Bevan-Dangle from the Humane Society of the United States, and Emily Hovermail from Humane Rescue Alliance. So however
Go
we
on
can manage
and
this.
squish up there and please testify on this bill that has no opponents.
Okay. Can I get started then?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much. So good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, esteemed colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Mary Lehman, asking for your support of HB 365, and that is a bill to change the state's spay-neuter grant fund formula to be able to continue Maryland's 10-year progress of reducing the overpopulation of cats and dogs in our shelters and our euthanasia rates. So we have had extensive conversations in ENT the last 2 years about this fund that was originally created back in 2013 by my predecessor, Delegate Barbara Frush. The law was set to expire in September of 2023, but this committee, the House, the Senate, voted to reauthorize that law for another 10 years. That did pass and was signed into law. But we did not touch the fee that has been in place that supports this fund. So the way it works is that manufacturers of every pet food product that is registered with our State Department of Agriculture has to pay a $100 fee per what is called product label. So this money is used for grants to county animal shelters and nonprofit organizations that do low-cost spay and neutering of cats and dogs. Now, you're going to hear from witnesses about inflation and the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and how much the costs of providing spay and neutering services have gone up substantially over the last few years. They've strained the limited funds of this grant, and you'll hear a lot more details about those cost burdens. HB 365 is going to require the fee that has been $100 now since October of 2015 to be adjusted annually for inflation beginning this October. That adjustment will start with the rate of inflation back in 2013, which I believe was like 1.45%. That's when the program began, and then phase in the average rate of inflation over that period to the present over the next 3 years. Then beginning in October 2026, that fee will be adjusted every year based on inflation. As the bill's sponsor, or I should say co-proposer with Delegate Ruth and advocates, we are trying to be mindful of the impact that an increased fee would have on the smallest companies. So we are exempting those pet food manufacturers that have annual gross incomes of less than $500,000. So mom and pop businesses will not be overly burdened. The Department of Agriculture has submitted a letter of information. I did have a very productive conversation with the agency a few days ago about its concerns, and we're working on amendments to address those. One of them is around priority language for grant funding, and we're changing that priority language to additional consideration to be given to applicants from underserved areas and those that serve more than one jurisdiction. In closing, I'm just going to say again that we need to grow the spay and neuter fund because Maryland is still euthanizing a staggering number of cats and dogs. The Department of Agriculture reported that shelters in the state took in 58,041 animals in 2021 and had to euthanize more than 8,000, about 14.5%. This is a huge difference from 2014. That was the first full year of the program, where 74,433 animals were taken in and more than 24,000 were put down, 32%. So even with our spay-neuter grant fund in place, between 2014 and 2019, Maryland still put down 100,000 pets over a 5-year period. We have to do better, and the way to do better is to grow this fund. I ask for your favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Sheila Ruth. I've worked very closely with Delegate Lehman in developing this bill and with the advocates as well. I will try to be quick because I think it's more important for you to hear from the people who are on the ground doing this work, who know much more about this than I do. But you'll hear how important this work has been in reducing euthanasia and pet populations. You'll also hear how some jurisdictions have no or limited low-cost spay-neuter services, and how provider shortages and inflation have increased the cost of procedures. To put them out of reach of many low to moderate income households, it can cost up to $500 in some jurisdictions for a spay and neuter, putting that out of reach of many low to moderate income households, which turn means more pets that are unfixed that are out there reproducing. You'll also hear how some of these nonprofits are picking up the slack. Some are providing services gratis. Others are paying out of their own pocket, for example, to transport animals to other jurisdictions when their jurisdiction does not have these services. And their costs have increased due to inflation, which is why it's so important that the fees also match inflation. So with that, Mr. Chair, I thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I could. My name is Cindy Sharpley. Thank you for having me here. I'm the director of Last Chance Animal Rescue. We provide spay and neuter, low-cost spay and neuter to about 22,000 animals a year. We were formed in '99. We opened our first spay and neuter clinic in 2003. So I've been doing this for a little bit. What I did was I took the numbers that we were paying for medical supplies that directly affect spay and neuter prices in March 2020. And after great thought about when did COVID really start, but surgical gloves went up 32%, e-collars, the lampshade thing, 51%. Some of the medical supplies, like the drugs you use to anesthetize the animals.
If you wouldn't mind speaking into the
I'm sorry.
mic a little bit more.
Isoflurane, if it went up 51%. Carprofen, it's a post-operative pain medication, went up 97%. Ketamine, yet another anesthetic, 200%. Insulin syringes, 24%. Oral dosing syringes, 42%. So needless to say, we're taking a hit on this. Additionally, labor. Pre-COVID, an average surgery tech in the industry was making about $16, $18 an hour, and now it's more like $20, $22 an hour. It is hard work. It is very hard work. And all the glamour is in adoptions, but there's no glamour in spay and neuter, but that's where all the work's done. And they deserve a living wage, absolutely. Then the veterinarian cost, amazing. One of my spay neuter vets came to me and said that she wanted a $40,000 a year raise this year. And I said, absolutely, what else can I do for you? And that there is a huge shortage of veterinarians, but running out of time, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Who'd like to go next?
Good afternoon, Chairman Barve, Vice Chairman Stein. My name is Lisa Radov. I'm the President and Chair of Maryland Votes for Animals, here today in support of HB 365. I can't resist the opportunity, Chair Barve, to say that we have no opposition, so we're barking up the right tree. Had to say it. The first of its kind in the nation, the Maryland Spay and Neuter Fund has been hugely successful. Maryland Votes for Animals was there at the beginning. We worked hard to establish this program. As of June 30th, 2022, the program has funded 216 projects that provided 95,558 spay and neuter surgeries for dogs and cats of low-income families and community cat programs. Several states, including Delaware, have passed legislation to create similar programs. When the Maryland Spay Neuter Fund was established in 2013, the small fee paid by pet food companies was not tied to the inflation rate. During those 10 years, the prices of most goods and services, as most of you know, has increased, mostly due to inflation as well as many other factors. Since using the rate of inflation is a pretty well-established method of adjusting costs over time, this method would keep the program appropriately funded through its scheduled sunset in 2032. The fee increase would be gradual and phased in over 3 years, with an exemption for small pet food companies subject to certain circumstances. The bill would also provide, as you heard, the routine wellness care that many of these organizations are doing at their own expense. By keeping pace with inflation, we can continue this life-saving program and its crucial services throughout the state of Maryland. Thanks to Delegate Lehman and Delegate Ruth, her partner, for sponsoring HB 365. I urge a favorable report.
Thank you very much.
I'll go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Barve, members of the committee. Emily Hovermail on behalf of the Humane Rescue Alliance, a regional animal welfare organization that happily helped over 4,000 families welcome their new animal companion last year. You have already heard very much about the immense success of the Maryland Spay-Neuter program and in reducing animal shelter euthanasia and intake in our state. And it's simply time for the program to grow and keep pace with the current costs and the current situation of the world that we live in. As you heard what the costs are for many of the shelters that are participating in these programs, rising costs add to the challenges that families have in being able to keep their pets. An inability to provide for veterinary care is one of the leading reasons that we see surrenders to our shelter, and this has been increasing over time as the costs have been increasing over time. And it's just one of those things, the costs are the costs. So it's important that this is included, the increases, as well as the routine preventative care, which are essential to community care and support public health. It helps individuals comply with their requirement to have their dogs vaccinated, and also provides resources that the community needs. It's good for our shelters, good for our pets, and good for our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have Catherine Flory with us? Come on up, Catherine, and then Jennifer Bevan-Dangle is on deck. We'll go to questions, and then, oh no, excuse me, we have a couple of favorable virtual folks, so go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Flory, and I am here representing the PAWS organization. I am the treasurer for PAWS, and I am also the Community Care and Advocacy Director for the Maryland SPCA. I don't want to reiterate what all of my colleagues have said today, and I know that there is no opposition, so I will make this quick. We do ask for a favorable report. I work every day in Baltimore City. I talk to shelters across the state on a daily basis. We need this. Every single shelter in the state is facing inflation and the cost of care for the animals in our care, but also ensuring that our community gets what they need. This bill will ensure that we're taking that next step. And I did have the privilege 10 years ago of being part of instituting this amazing fund. And I can tell you from firsthand, it has made a difference. So please help us continue to have it making a difference and provide a favorable report. Thank you very much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. You too. Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Bevan-Dangle. I'm the State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. I will not repeat any of the points that have already been stated. This serves our shelters, it serves our communities, and it serves our animals. I do want to speak to the amendments that we're aware of because while there is no opposition, you know, the devil can be in the details. The sponsor's already spoken well to the state's concerns. We're very happy to work on their two changes and find language that can accommodate those changes. We do not think those are substantive, and we have no concerns about finding language that all parties can agree to. We do stand by the indexing of the fee that is the crux of the bill. The initial addition of this licensing fee in 2013 did not significantly impact prices or pet ownership or have any effect statewide on the consumer side. And the indexing is being done in a very careful manner. It's spread out over 3 years, and then it will just be indexed over the following years. So we feel that the net impact of that fee on the individual producers has been held to a minimum, especially when you consider the exemption for small companies, while the cumulative impact of this program of seeing these fees raised has a tremendous impact that is directly felt by pet owners and shelters across the state. So we urge a favorable report with very limited amendments.
Okay, so we have a number of virtual witnesses. Jean Salvatore with Shadow Cats TNR. Jean, are you with us? Great. Welcome. You have 2 minutes. You're also muted. You're muted. There we go.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Obviously, I'm in favor of HB 365. Shadow Cats TNR is a home-based, all-volunteer, primarily trap, neuter, vaccinate, and return to site nonprofit. We were established in late 2015. I'm president and founder of this organization. We've been working very closely in Harford County with our shelter. When we first started working, doing TNR en masse, we benefited from the grants that we were allotted from Maryland Department of Agriculture greatly. It helped us to fix about 1,920 cats at a cost of about $30 a cat. I'll tell you how we get to that. It's because we transfer our cats out of state. We are in the north part of the state, and we have to go to Delaware primarily to get that cost, working with providers there. Its average cost for a veterinarian to spay or neuter a cat in Harford County is about $450. Veterinarians are referring people to us, as do animal control and the shelter. Working with the shelter with the help from the grants, we've been able, as I said, to not only fix a number of cats, but reduce their intake from about 70% when we started to down to 52% a few years ago. And we're trying to lower that number more and more as we continue. There are about 26,000 roaming cats using estimates in Harford County. We've so far done about 10,000 in Harford, also reaching to Cecil, also reaching to Baltimore County and Baltimore City to help where we can. And actually even Southern PA, but we have to have separate funding for that. Multi-jurisdiction opportunities through the grant amendments would be very beneficial because again, we reach to those people. And in the transportation of these cats, we spent $1,900 in tolls alone last year, traveled 26,000 miles. So we really appreciate these aspects of the bill and hope you support.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Stephanie Stulich with the Beltsville Community Cats. Stephanie, are you with us? Welcome, Stephanie, and welcome to the committee. Please unmute yourself, and you have 2 minutes. You haven't unmuted yourself. Okay. We still can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes, I can hear you now. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Greetings, honored delegates. The need for state support for sterilizing feral and abandoned cats in our community is now greater than ever. I serve on the board of Beltsville Community Cats, a 501c3 charity that has trapped and sterilized over 1,200 kittens and cats in the 4 years since we began in 2019. We could not have achieved this without the Maryland Spay Neuter Fund. Roughly half of those cats were taken into our foster network and adopted out to forever homes where they bring joy and love to their adoptive families. About half of the cats were returned to their original location, either because they can't be socialized or because our foster network has reached capacity, but at least their spay-neuter surgeries will prevent them from adding to the population of free-roaming cats. This work is increasingly challenging for organizations such as ours due to dramatic increases in the prices charged by low-cost spay-neuter clinics. For example, the Prince George's SPCA doubled their price for a spay-neuter package from $25 in 2020 to $50 in 2023. Similarly, the Spay Now Clinic in Laurel has raised their rates by 45% in the past year alone, but these are still very low rates. In addition, some cats that we take to these clinics have injuries or other medical needs that are not covered by the Maryland Spay Neuter Fund. In addition, as families continue to struggle with the economic impact of the COVID pandemic, they too often simply dump their pet cats outside or they move away and leave their pets to fend for themselves. Groups like BCC are committed to seeing that free-roaming cats have access to the health benefits of sterilization and vaccination. Benefits to communities include a reduction in unwanted kittens while minimizing the spread of disease and fighting among cats. Benefits to government-run shelters include reductions in intake, euthanasia, and complaints. We are grateful for the proposed improvements to the Maryland Spay Neuter Fund and urge a favorable committee report. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Alice Burton. Alice, are you with us? Alice Burton?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair and committee members.
Okay.
My name is Alice Burton. I am the Programs Director for Alley Cat Allies. We are known as the global engine of change for cats. And we have over 35,000 supporters in Maryland. We have been active in Maryland for 30 years, and our headquarters is in Bethesda, Maryland. And I am also proud to say that I am a longtime Virginia resident. I'm sorry, Maryland resident. And I was born and raised in Calvert County. We've helped shelters and veterinarians launch spay and neuter and vaccination programs for cats in every part of the state. We strongly support 365 and ask you to vote in favor. This bill will continue to close the gap of one of the greatest barriers low-income owners face to neutering their animals, which is cost. Low cost or free spay and neuter reduces animals relinquished to shelters. And we all know that shelters should be the absolute last resort for animals to go in. Maryland is on the cutting edge and is a model to other states, and we do applaud you. This bill would strengthen the Maryland Spay Neuter Grants program that has increased the number of animals who can be spayed and neutered. Animal shelters throughout Maryland often have the physical infrastructure they need, but without sufficient funding for spay and neuter services, that infrastructure would be used for euthanizing animals instead of providing humane, non-lethal care, which is what the public overwhelmingly demands. The greater ability of spay neuter also benefits community cats by preventing breeding, common behaviors associated with mating, and improving their health. I ask you to vote in favor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all the people who are purely in favor of the bill. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, we have two people who are signed up favorable to amendments. Both are virtual. The first is Savan Kahi. Did I get your name correct?
No, and no one ever does. So it's lots of extra letters, Irish. Thank you, Chair. I am Savan Coy with the Pet Food Institute, the voice of pet food makers. PFI commends Maryland for the great success of the spay and neuter program. Last year, we supported the 10-year extension, and this year we support expanding the program and establishing a process for voluntary donations. However, we cannot support an increase on the tax levied solely on pet food makers. This bill would raise the annual registration cost of each product an estimated 36% in the first 3 years alone, imposing a significant burden. We urge the committee to reject the tax increases on pet food makers who already pay a $50 per product registration fee. The current $100 spay and neuter tax generates nearly $1 million a year. That is about 10% of pet food makers' budgets for all taxes and fees, which is a significant share for just one state. A tax increase would reduce product registrations in Maryland, limit consumer choices, and reduce pet food sales in brick and mortar stores during this difficult economic time. We respectfully request that money be appropriated from the state budget to pay for program expansion and ask that the committee remove the spay and neuter tax increase and instead provide additional ways for Marylanders to contribute. Such alternative funding sources are already used in Maryland for other programs, such as the tax donation checkoff for the Chesapeake Bay Fund and the Chesapeake Bay Trust license plate. Similar mechanisms, as well as an appropriation from state funds, should be used to provide the funds needed to expand the spay and neuter program. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share PFI's perspective and your consideration of our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last witness is Louise Calderwood. Louise, are you with us? And welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Now that's a nice, easy to pronounce Scottish name. The American Feed Industry Association thanks you for the opportunity to comment on the Department of Agriculture Spay Neuter Fund. AFIA members include nearly 650 domestic and international companies, including livestock feed and pet food manufacturers. We applaud Maryland for its work to support access to low-cost spay and neuter services, which have proven to be an effective tool to reduce the number of pet euthanasias. Pet food manufacturers are concerned about the plight of unwanted pets and frequently donate product to shelters and other pet care services. However, we oppose any action taken by the Maryland General Assembly, which may lead directly or indirectly to an increase in fees collected from pet food manufacturers to expand the program and to provide additional wellness services at a time at the time of the spay and neuter procedure. Our members are facing the same inflation pressures which have been presented earlier today. The AFIA appreciates House Bill 365 and it's proposing to process through which a person may make a voluntary donation to the fund. A citizen-led effort to expand the fund is an appropriate means by which to support services. We encourage the legislature to consider different funding sources and not increase the fees assessed on commercial pet food. We oppose the use of the existing fee of $100 to broaden the spay and neuter program to pay for wellness care for cats and dogs at the time of the spay or neuter service, or to pay for the transportation services from unserved areas. Proposed additions of these services is creating a welfare program for pets well beyond the initial purpose of the fund, which was to reduce animal shelter overpopulation and decrease dog and cat euthanasia rates. Maryland citizens can increase the amount of funds available for spay-neuter procedures through donations, specialty license plates, and tax checkoffs, all of which have a proven success in the state, rather than increasing the burden on businesses who do not contribute to the problem of unwanted pets and are already supporting animal shelters. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. We've got a question. Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much. To the virtual witnesses, I heard you mention that you prefer for the sponsor to find other ways to fund this. And so just so that I'm clear, you don't ever want this fee to be increased at all?
So we're already with Maryland. You guys have the highest spay and neuter tax rate in the country. In addition to the $50 per product fee that our producers or our members are already paying, it's $150 to register a product in Maryland. As Ms. Calderwood has testified as well, we do not contribute to the problem, but we are the sole payers of this program. And there are other ways that we can find a mutual way to benefit this program and expand it.
Even though the fee hasn't been increased in, almost a decade or so, I believe?
7 years.
As Savan has pointed out, is that Maryland is already so far out of skew with the rest of the country. For the members of your committee that are so fond of math, one state is 2% of the total state, and yet our members are already paying 10% of their total fees nationwide into Maryland for a program that has really no bearing to the manufacture of pet food. It's an important issue. It's a tragic situation, but it does not have a bearing on the manufacture or sale of pet food.
But in other states, do they manage spay and neuter programs in the same way that we use our money for?
I'm sorry, can you explain the question just a little deeper when you mean manage in the same way? Can you just explain that a little more for me?
So we use ours for spay and neuter fund. Do other states where you say the fee is lower, do they use it for the same thing?
Yes, similar states will provide grants to organizations to provide spay and neuter services, but I would add that there are other states that fund their programs in the manner in which we've suggested, including voluntary tax checkoffs as well as special license plates. And other states also provide appropriations to supplement their spay and neuter fund.
Thank you. Can the sponsor respond?
Mr. Chairman,
if you don't?
could I
Sure.
address Delegate Boyce's question?
Sure.
So first of all, if I could clarify the fee you just heard about, and you just heard the $150 figure. So first of all, there is a $50 fee that goes to the state's chemist that does not go into this fund at all. That is required for every pet food product, and the reason for that is it's a safety issue. The state chemist has to be able to verify that those ingredients that a manufacturer says are in their dog or cat food or pet snacks are the actual ingredients, that there's nothing dangerous or poisonous or toxic in there. So that $50 has nothing to do with this fund. It's related to pet food and to ensure the safety, but it does not go into this fund. It's the $100 you heard about that was phased in over 3 years when this law was first created. It was first $50, then it went to $75, then it's been at $100 since 2015, so going on 8 years now. There are a few other states, I'm sure many more states that provide grant funding to nonprofits and shelters, a few that use this model of fees on pet food. I think the most recent to be enacted, I believe, is New Mexico. And New Mexico, I'm not sure if the idea for the exemption came from them. We had talked about that, the exemption that we are putting in this bill for the smallest companies. New Mexico has a higher threshold of like $2 or $3 million, what they consider small companies that do not pay the fee. There are a handful of other states, I believe West Virginia, maybe Arkansas, that have spay-neuter funds. So if that helps clarify some of your questions.
Hold on, let me just, pardon me 1 second. So this isn't based, this fee is based on the product. Is it based, if they doubled the amount of food they sold, would the fee double?
Okay, so it's per product label is what they call it. So first there's the $50 fee that goes to the chemist.
Right.
And the state chemist does come under the Department of Agriculture. That is a function of testing and verifying that the ingredients that manufacturers say are in that particular food are in fact the ingredients in there and there's nothing harmful. Then there's the $100 fee on top of that. That's the money that completely supports the spay and neuter fund that we're not touching the $50 fee, but that is not going away. We are proposing an increase in the $100 fee indexed to inflation. Just one more.
But hold on, if a dog food company didn't increase the number of products, but they quadrupled their sales, how much would the fee go up?
It would be on a per...
Zero.
Zero.
Because it's per product. So
I see.
if it's...
So if they have a new brand of dog food with a different flavor, they'd pay it.
Correct.
But if they quadrupled their sales, the fee wouldn't increase at all.
Oh, there's
Right.
no... yeah.
So if it's chunky ocean fish, they pay $100 to introduce chunky ocean fish. And then no matter how many cans they sell of chunky ocean fish, there's no more fee.
Okay. All right. I understand.
But if we sold chunky ocean fish in, different increments or different size increments or in different iterations for different ages of pets for each of those products. So you could end up with 12 different products for one, introduced line. Then you're paying that extra $100 spay and neuter fee above and beyond the $50 per product registration fee.
Mr. Chairman, if I could
just
point
to
out.
speak, if
No,
may,
I think, you know what? I understand how it all works now.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
no.
quite briefly, the $50 fee, that's totally regulated to the business of pet food manufacturer. We understand that, we applaud that, we support that. That is to appropriately regulate our industry.
Okay.
That would be a very different conversation than the $100 fee that's not attached to the manufacturer of pet food, in no way related to that.
Okay. I believe that ends the public hearing on House Bill 365. Thank you to everyone. Let's move now to House Bill 378, Delegate Love. Nope, sorry, 325, Delegate Terraza, pardon me.
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I bring up my panel? Who is joining me? And I believe we have one on that's virtual as well. Is that correct? Okay.
Okay, Delegate Terraza, you're on.
All right, good afternoon, Chairman Barve and Vice Chair Stein, esteemed members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Jen Terraza. Thank you for this opportunity to present HB 325, which expands veterinary services in the state of Maryland in two ways. As drafted, it would allow for out-of-state veterinarians to provide routine medical care to animals in shelters, including spaying and neutering, vaccinations, health exams, and completing health certificates. And two, it would allow vet techs to administer rabies vaccines. Why is this bill necessary? There's a well-documented and discussed in the last bill veterinary shortage across the United States. A recent national study estimates that by 2030 there'll be 15,000 fewer veterinarians than are needed to care for the nation's pet. The shortage of care is especially problematic for animals in shelters, most of which do not have veterinarians on staff. For routine care, they instead rely on visiting volunteer veterinarians and have to compete with the general population to be seen at crowded veterinary clinics in the area, which are already over capacity. So the problem is that animals stay in shelters longer, even when there are ready, willing, and able adopters, because they shouldn't and can't be sent home without rabies vaccines, and they shouldn't be sent home without testing for basic diseases and being spayed and neutered. This leads to crowding of shelters, and we've already heard about pets having to be euthanized, and longer stays mean instead of being placed in a loving home, animals are isolated in limited areas available at shelters. The longer they stay in shelters, the more stressed they become, and the less friendly or used to human contact they are, and the less adoptable they become. It's a vicious cycle. Expanding who can offer rabies vaccines routine care will address the length of time that animals have to stay in shelters, help get rescued animals into forever homes sooner rather than later. And note also that licensed vet techs in Maryland already administer other vaccines. It's just rabies vaccines that they're currently not permitted to administer. Senator Karen Lewis Young, who has the cross file on this and the hearing right now, although hopefully after we're done, and I have been working closely with stakeholders, MDH, MDA, State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners, and Maryland Veterinary Medical Associates, along with the advocates that are here on the concerns they've raised. And I believe there will be an amendment coming out of those discussions. HB 325 is a vital and necessary step to proactively address the care gap for Maryland pets, relieve pressure on strained animal shelters, and promote public health. I respectfully urge a favorable report. And I'm now going to turn it over to Jennifer Bevan-Dangle and others.
Great, Jennifer. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Bevan-Dangle. I'm the State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. We're very grateful for the sponsor for bringing forward this legislation, and we're very grateful to all the stakeholders for being willing to have ongoing discussions about amendments. We understand the amendments are not in final form before you now, but we do believe that they're headed in a productive and positive direction. This legislation came about from discussions with our shelter partners through PAWS, asking them, what are your greatest crises that you're facing? And the inability to get these very basic provisions of care for the pets in their care has been flagged time and again as a hugely limiting factor. It doesn't just impact the pets that are waiting in shelters, although they certainly suffer when they can't be released because they can't get the procedures needed to be placed in adoptive homes. It also impacts constituents in your communities. Our shelter partners run low-cost clinics, and they also often open their doors to individuals from community who come in with pets in need when that individual can't afford veterinary care otherwise. This bill is not taking away a practice or a service from the vets. These are individuals in your community who simply will not get distemper. They will not get rabies, and they will live with the consequences. And unfortunately, your community will bear the consequences of those animals not being vaccinated. And we understand that's not ideal, and so this is one of those solutions. Again, we're very grateful to try to find a way to thread the needle on the different amendments. We do feel that some of the proposals on the table remain too restrictive, but I think that we are heading in a good direction. We hope to have for the subcommittee some amendments that reflect the urgent need to address these two issues. At the end of the day, our shelters, especially those who maybe service, such as you'll hear from the vet shortly, across state lines, those shelters need to be able to bring their vets in and support communities and do the work they do and get animals into homes. So we hope that we can move this bill. There's an urgency to now. So thank you.
Great. How about Catherine Flory?
Hello. Again, my name is Catherine Flory. I am the treasurer for PAWS as well as the Community Care and Advocacy Director for the Maryland SPCA. I have been in your committee a few times. Thank you for having me. Of all the bills that I have spoken on, this to me is the most important. When Jennifer, my colleague, was talking about shelters and the desperate need that they are in, my shelter is one of them. And I think of the Maryland SPCA as the Disney World of animal shelters. And we are having equally a challenging time finding veterinarians and getting the animals in our community services. Not only do I work with animals that are in our shelter, but I do run a community clinic. We do about 13 a year in different parts of Baltimore City, and we're struggling. We need this help. I work with an amazing group of certified technicians that have the skills, that have the want to learn, but unfortunately, because of our law, we can't do that. If we don't do something to fix this, I truly believe we will have a public health crisis with rabies sometime in the future. Thank you very much, and please give a favorable report to this very, very important piece of legislation.
Okay, we're going to turn to Megan McAndrew, who is joining us virtually. Dr. McAndrew, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name, as mentioned, is Dr. Megan McAndrew, and I'm the National Alliance Medical Advisor for Humane Rescue Alliance, the largest animal services provider in the Mid-Atlantic region. We currently support partnerships across Maryland. In addition to speaking on behalf of Humane Rescue Alliance, I am also here today speaking as a Maryland licensed veterinarian and resident of Charles County. There, as mentioned, is a well-documented veterinary shortage across the United States, which is being deeply felt by those in the profession, as well as those seeking veterinary care, and is predicted to only become much worse. For this reason, it is critical to the community and public health that we proactively identify solutions, especially when it comes to the ability to provide preventative care. Nowhere is the need more evident than in our animal shelters. Fortunately, there are viable and proven solutions. I've been in shelter medicine for over 15 years, the majority of which I've spent working in animal shelters in North Carolina and DC, where I've trained non-veterinary care staff to administer rabies vaccinations, which is a technically very simple procedure. So when I began working with our Maryland partners, I was concerned to hear that animals have to wait sometimes weeks for a visiting veterinarian to come and administer a rabies vaccine so that an animal can move out of the shelter. This, when, as mentioned, many Maryland shelters are already faced with having to make difficult euthanasia decisions based on lack of space. I'm licensed in Maryland, in addition to DC, in large part because I was constantly seeing the animals in our partner facilities bottleneck, waiting for routine veterinary care, and often acquiring life-threatening illness during that time and putting additional strain on Maryland's public animal shelters. The administration of rabies vaccination by non-veterinarians is currently legal in 15 states as well as the District of Columbia. I hope you will consider how passage of House Bill 325 will relieve pressure on strained animal shelters, promote public health, and help take a proactive step toward providing needed care for community pets during a time when vet shortages are already resulting in challenges with accessibility. I respectfully urge a favorable report.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to, any questions for
Mr. Chairman? We have one more witness.
Well, she signed up favorable with amendments.
Oh.
Well, yes, mea culpa. I did sign up favorable with amendments, but it was favorable with amendments. So I apologize in terms of how I signed up.
Okay, well, go ahead. Yeah.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Lisa Radov, President and Chair of Maryland Votes for Animals. You've already heard from professionals, our shelter partners, about the need for this legislation. We definitely would appreciate all of the stakeholders working together, which is what we're trying to do, and apologies for me signing up that way. I am favorable with amendments, but favorable because we're working on amendments. This is something that Maryland needs, and probably, as Catherine said, one of the most important bills that we will look at. Thanks so much to Delegate Terrassa for sponsoring this important legislation, and I urge a favorable report with amendments.
Right, we've got a question, Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been heard from several veterinarians, and I have animals on my own, and they. Can you hear me all right?
Not really.
Yes.
I'm having trouble.
That's why I got hearing aids,
All right, I'll try that next time.
I was having trouble myself, but much better this year. I'll try to speak up. But I've heard from several veterinarians, and I have animals of my own, and, I've spent a small fortune at veterinarians over the years with some of my animals. But there's some concern that's been raised to me that hopefully you can answer. I have a couple questions. One, would an unlicensed veterinarian be able to use or administer anesthetics under this bill?
Somebody, one of you want to answer that? No, I don't.
No. Yeah. Katie, do you want?
No, I would say this simply is looking at the rabies vaccination. I mean, there are so many animals in our shelters right now that literally can't come home because they need one shot. And we don't have enough veterinarians on staff to be able to administer that shot.
So the answer to that question would be no.
And just to clarify, we're working with veterinarians on some of the reciprocity provisions because we saw that concern. So I appreciate you raising it.
And the second question, can an unlicensed veterinarian complete a health certificate?
So, do you want to?
So similarly, so there's two provisions to the bill. The first is allowing more staff to administer rabies. That's the part that's in the health code. And the second is the piece that you're referring to. This is the question around how much reciprocity there should be for state veterinarians who are licensed in other states to cross borders, such as the vet was speaking about earlier, to provide basic routine care to our pets. We are very optimistic in the direction the conversations are going about how broad that reciprocity should be, what scope of service should be allowed under it. At the bare minimum, we would hope that veterinarians could cross state lines to administer vaccinations and to do just basic diagnostic tests where you're testing for parvo, you're testing for some of these, really transmissible diseases. We feel that that would be at least the baseline that would allow safety to get these clinics still operating, get greater, staff to bolster these clinics, but still do the most good for, community safety and for shelter animals. We'd love to have a conversation about other services, but I think that from the conversation so far, that's where this is headed, is around allowing veterinarians from out of state to do just those most basic sort of health-focused tasks. And we understand the law as drafted is broader on that reciprocity piece, and we're grateful for the conversations we've had.
And I thank you for that, but I guess my questions would be best asked after the amendments are offered, and then we can get to the real clarity of what the intent is.
Yeah, and I appreciate the questions. I think we are definitely addressing the concerns that you've raised.
Thank you.
But we'll get you the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I understand. I would say this bill is likened to when we kind of have emergencies like in our state and we bring in doctors or nurses from other states to help with case management of patients, or in this case, animals. And if that is the goal, is there somewhat of an expiration date on this, or it is as needed? The legislature says, hey, like right now, this shelter has X amount of pets that need X amount of service, and we put out a call to, Indiana, and 2 or 3 doctors and maybe a nurse come down, they kind of complete the task and they will go, per se. Is that the vision?
I don't know if you want to.
So that's actually a suggestion that has not been floated yet in the conversations, is to term limit that piece of it and do it as a more of a pilot. It's a very good point that right now, if there was an earthquake that hit, that reciprocity would already be allowed for out-of-state vets to come in and assist. It's already allowed for true states of disaster, states of natural disaster. We sort of see the status of our shelter partners as a state of emergency because of the staffing. So we could definitely add to the conversations. Is there a time limit that should be proposed? We're focusing more on the services to keep that the
So I guess the
core.
question also then would be, what is considered a standard state of emergency for animals or for shelters where one would have to call in additional resources?
So I think this is based on a general emergency that we're short on vets and they were having trouble getting animals out of shelters. And talking with the vets and with the vet board, I'm not sure that there's a clear end of a shortage in sight. And so I think the emergency, maybe I'm forgetting what your question is, I apologize if I did, but it's that I don't think we're looking at necessarily limited time in terms of getting, and I guess maybe you guys were looking at folks flying in from all parts over, but I think in many ways there may be a vet that's across state lines that can just come over for
I think it's the same difference.
Right.
So let me go back. Sorry, Mr. Chair, just couple clarification. So if that's the case, then again, let's say, okay, the shelters are packed, and I think there's a question. I think one, we just as a society are more pet prone than I think we have been in the past. So I think there's that issue. But I guess the question I'm asking is, when would someone be able to say, I need to put in the call, I need to put a call out for X amount of individuals. So like, what's the threshold for one then to put out the call because you have more, I guess, patients per se than resources to manage?
So I don't think there's a clear answer to that. And the reason why is I look at the state of Maryland as a whole. We have some counties that are already before COVID, before any of this, that were under-resourced. And now they're in a much, for lack of better words, worse position than, let's say, a shelter that I work for that's in Baltimore City. But my shelter is also still struggling with this. So it's very hard to say, at this time frame or this emergency, this is when we're going to need it. What we have found over and over is that maybe a shelter that is very close to Delaware doesn't have a vet on their staff. Their vet, let's say, has COVID. They're out for the next month. There's nothing they can do to move those animals except maybe have somebody come over from Delaware that's willing to do it and to help out. We can't always tell when that's going to happen, but we also, throughout the state, see that domino effect, that when one shelter has those issues, we all try to jump in and help, but then we start having those issues and everybody starts to. So I think it would be unfair and wrong for me to say, well, this is going to be the stop point of when that emergency needs to happen. We all need to be able to use veterinarians as we can. And even for my shelter, I was always thinking, wow, it would be great to be able to have Dr. M from DC maybe come to our shelter when all of our vets are not available. Does that help to answer that question?
Yes, I guess again, the question becomes when one can ask for that permission, or is it just an automatic authorization that I can say, because you can cross state lines, when I need help, I can make that call whenever it's needed?
Under the bill, there's no emergency situation required. And but keep in mind, the folks that would be coming across the border would be only for shelter animals, and the point would be to get them.
Understood.
Yeah, get them moving.
I think it falls in the same question.
Okay, and then in terms of the vet techs being able to, they're already administering all the other vaccines. So I see this as just an expansion of what they can do and the ability to get, which also helps.
And they have that training to do so. They just aren't allowed to do so. Am I clear?
Yeah, I mean, all techs are trained as far as giving vaccinations. It's simply just a different vaccination, and all techs are always trained on what to look for reactions and different things like that. So yes, it would be the same type of training.
Okay.
Thank you.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I'm a little confused about the scope of this. Okay. So does this only, okay, there are two parts. One is the reciprocity part that you described about coming over the state lines. Does that apply only to animal shelters?
Yes.
Or any facility or person? Only to animal shelters?
It does.
Okay. The rabies, allowing the techs to administer the rabies vaccines, does that apply only to animal shelters, or is that across the board?
That would be across the board, and we're certainly having discussions with veterinarians about what type of which types of vet techs and what type of supervision. But I think part of the reason you may be confused by our discussion here, and we look a little confused, and we're not, is just that we've had lots of conversations with the veterinarian community, and so some of these things are kind of on the chopping block, and some of them are staying. So I'm happy to clarify any of that.
No, thank you, Delegate. I think you answered my question. I was just getting confused with all the questions about what was the scope of the bill. So I think I now understand, and I'm just going to restate it. So the reciprocity part applies only to animal shelters. The allowing the techs and others to administer rabies vaccines is across the board.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hopefully the last question.
What's different about the rabies vaccine?
So maybe somebody else also wants to add this, but my understanding is it's regulated under the health code, and the concern is that it affects human health. So you want to make sure, I don't know what the history of, maybe somebody else knows what the history is, but it is under a separate section of the code, and I think a separate volume of the code.
Thank you.
Does that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to the final three witnesses who are signed up favorable with amendments. In person, all three of them are in person, apparently. Ashley Nichols, Robert Silcox, Megan Noyes.
some space.
Who'd like to go first?
Okay, give me one moment. There we go. All right, I can go first for whoever's ready. So I am Dr. Ashley Nichols. I am a practicing licensed Maryland veterinarian. I can answer a lot of the questions you guys posed, so hold on to that. But I am also the president-elect of the Maryland Veterinary Medical Association. I would just like to thank everybody for welcoming us to speak here today. I'm here as a concerned veterinarian, stating my position for HB 325 as favorable with very specific amendments. I've emailed all of you a very evidence-based document that goes over the risks that this bill, left as is, poses not only to the health of Maryland's animals, but to the health of the people as well. It is vital that this bill be amended so that all of the proposed amendments to the Agriculture Code be removed. It is vital that anyone practicing in the state of Maryland must be registered and licensed under the State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners. This allows them to monitor, and not doing so undermines the ability of the State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners to enforce the Veterinary Practice Act and undermines the quality of veterinary medicine. As for the rabies vaccine, it is a 100% preventable, universally fatal virus to mammals and humans. So the latest case reported in Maryland was in 2013. So I want all of you guys to realize that. I want you to think of your pets at home, as many of us are pet owners, and consider that you have a really good relationship with your veterinarian because you respect their knowledge and their ability to perform quality veterinary medicine. All animals in the state of Maryland deserve this, not just those who can pay. So in conclusion, I want you guys to do amendments that say only under the direct supervision of a licensed veterinarian can a registered veterinary technician be permitted to admit rabies vaccines for HB 325.
Who would like to go next?
Thanks, Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing us to testify. My name is Megan Noyce. I'm a practicing veterinarian in Annapolis at the Anne Arundel Veterinary Emerge Clinic, and I live in Calvert County. I'm here as a concerned veterinarian to state our position that we are favorable on this bill with amendments. If this bill is intended to address the veterinary shortage in the state, we feel it's unlikely to make a significant difference because this is a nationwide shortage. This is not just unique to Maryland. Every state in the United States is experiencing this shortage. Animal shelters do face unique challenges. They require special consideration to provide timely attention. However, we have a responsibility to make sure that they're protected from substandard practice that having unlicensed veterinarians could create. Recognizing the importance of prompt rabies vaccination, as Dr. Nichols stated, this is a current illness. This is not a historical illness. It happens, it's in our wildlife, and it does affect humans as well. We do support the proposed amendment that allows only registered veterinary technicians to administer rabies vaccines while under the direct supervision of only Maryland licensed veterinarians. We do not support allowing non-registered technicians or clinic staff to administer rabies vaccines. As far as the licensing of veterinarians or allowing practice of veterinarians licensed outside of Maryland, Maryland does not historically have a reciprocity between other states as far as licensing goes. The broad language of this bill does not narrow the scope down to just shelter medicine. It does open up the potential for unlicensed veterinarians to practice outside of shelters.
And Robert Silcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Dr. Robert Silcox. I'm a practicing veterinarian in Harford County, Maryland. I'm past president of the Maryland Veterinary Medical Association, but I'm also past president of the Humane Society of Harford County. So I do have perspective from both sides here. I'm here to state my concern and position to be favorable to 325 with very specific amendments. The bill as it's currently written circumvents veterinary licensure and the regulation of the practice of veterinary medicine by the Maryland State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners. That's a dangerous thing to remove the oversight and regulation that the board holds veterinarians accountable for the quality of practice of medicine in this state. Your pets deserve high standards of care, so do the shelter animals. Application for a veterinary license in Maryland is neither difficult nor cost prohibitive. Removing those guardrails cannot be supported by the Maryland Veterinary Medical Association. Many veterinarians carry multiple state licenses. That is not an uncommon thing. So really the need to have reciprocity, just all it does is circumvent the Maryland State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners. The State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners and the Department of Health have recommended very specific amendments to this bill to define and narrow the scope of this bill to just allow registered veterinary technicians as defined by the State Board of Veterinary Medical Association or State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners to be able to administer rabies vaccine under the direct supervision of a licensed veterinarian. No other provisions would we be able to support. I would also offer that the demand for veterinary medicine continues to increase overall, and really in order to address that shortage, we really need to work with the Department of Agriculture,
Okay.
the University of Maryland, and Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine
I think we have a number of questions. Well, I have some questions. So basically, your position is that you're not against a veterinary tech administering the shot, but they have to be under the direct supervision of Maryland veterinarian.
That's correct.
Okay.
And they need to be
Yes.
registered as well. So
Okay, let me go to my next question.
Sure.
So I've gotten 5 vaccinations for COVID, and none of them were administered by doctors. They were all administered by, I assume, registered nurses or some sort of a tech. And, every year at our company, we do a flu shot clinic, where all our employees get a flu shot. And it is I presume a nurse, it's not an MD. She has never been supervised by a doctor. So the question I have is, what is it about the rabies vaccine that makes it different from all those other shots?
So I can go to that. So there is a national guideline that was made up by the National Public Health Veterinarians, and this is to provide, so rabies is, let's be clear, 100% fatal. And so
And so is COVID.
Well,
I mean, for some
no, it's not
populations.
true. So once you start showing
it's fatal.
signs
It's
of
not
rabies,
100%.
you die. that is what
Okay.
it is. And so it is also controlled by veterinarians, because one of the most common sources of human-related transmission, with the exception of bite bats, is domesticated animals. So there is a national guideline for the control and prevention of rabies. It is not geared towards the control and prevention of rabies in pets, but controlled for animals. So there is a national guideline. That national guideline has veterinarians being the primary people doing it. Us not following that means that we are deviating from the national standard.
Okay, but that wasn't my
it
question.
also-
Hold on. Okay. My question was, what is it about a rabies vaccination that makes it fundamentally different from some other injection that can be administered to an animal?
Sure. A lot of it gets back to accountability. Someone needs to be accountable for the handling, the storage, and the proper administration of that vaccine to be effective, because rabies is, again, such a serious problem. And we don't see it as much in this country because we've done such a fantastic job in our rabies programs in following these national guidelines. But if you were to go to India, there are thousands of people a year that die of rabies exposure. because they don't have those same kinds of systems set in place. So if we start to circumvent those systems, we expose ourselves to public health risk. And it's not that there's necessarily anything extraordinarily special about the rabies vaccine, except that the end result is so serious.
So you're saying that a tech who's unsupervised isn't capable of doing an injection?
So it's, again,
Well,
like
it's
I said,
not-
it
it's
gets
not
back
just
to the
that.
accountability.
It's
If
and it's
there is an animal that supposedly received a rabies vaccination, but then develops rabies, who then is accountable for that? Under the current legislature and the State Board of Veterinary Board of Examiners, the veterinarian is responsible.
Yeah,
That's why all rabies vaccinations come with a signed certificate from that veterinarian and a tag number that gets it back to whatever clinic, shelter, or county municipality that administered the rabies vaccine is trackable.
Delegate Stolberti has a question.
I just had a small comment, Mr. Chairman. When you said that the individuals who had COVID were probably going to die. Well, I'm here.
And we're glad.
And we're glad for that.
Thank you for.
Glad about that. Delegate Boyce.
Thank you. I want to go back, unfortunately, to the chairman's point. So you're saying that the liability is too great and the end result is deadly, which is why you prefer someone not to, or a tech to give the shot. But the question then is, if they can give other shots and an outcome could be just as deadly for whatever reason, wouldn't the liability just be the clinic or the doctor anyway?
Not necessarily, because it also, for most of your other vaccines, say, let's talk about, the distemper vaccine. Say a dog gets, injected and gets a vaccine for distemper and comes down with parvo anyway. A lot of times you're under a manufacturing warranty, and the manufacturer will, as long as it was administered in a clinic and not at, your backyard and things like that, will cover that and cover treatment. There is no treatment for rabies.
But wouldn't the process be the same,
I
even
think-
though the outcome is deadly?
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
think
confused.
the difference here is that rabies is a communicable disease. It's a zoonotic disease. So if your dog gets rabies, now you're at risk for rabies. Now you've got to go through post-exposure rabies protocol, or worse. You don't realize that you were exposed, you end up in the hospital, and doctors are trying to figure out what exactly do you have, because rabies symptoms are not necessarily always going to present themselves very clearly right at the beginning of the stage.
I certainly understand. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I will make this point. I still, there isn't clear information why someone still can't give the injection. For instance, I could get the flu shot from the pharmacy tech.
Sure.
Right? I could still get flu. I can give it to Delegate Healy and she could die and I could die. Right?
Sure.
Like there's still a potential end result to that. So it's not the fault of the pharmacy tech, because the pharmacy tech can give, we allow that.
But
the end
it's-
result doesn't make sense, because the flu can mask itself as different things. COVID can mask itself as different things. It just doesn't seem to be getting to the point about why a tech cannot, who is licensed, give this rabies shot.
I agree. So one of the things that is in the amendments that have been proposed by the Department of Health is that a registered veterinary technician be allowed to give under direct supervision. They are talking to try to define what is going to be acceptable supervision. So does that mean a veterinarian that is reachable, or is it a veterinarian that is on premises, or is it a veterinarian standing over that technician's shoulder? And that part still needs to be worked out, and I think there's some leeway there on our side.
Well, I'd like to see this get worked out, because again, I will put it back. I've been vaccinated, right? Rubella, mumps, all that. There wasn't a physician standing over the person giving me the shot. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Delegate Guyton.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Actually, my question was just asked and answered, I believe, by Delegate Boyce. It really did refer to the availability of supervising veterinarians, since we really are trying to address the problem of a serious shortage with this bill in very small circumstances. I'm just wondering how we could ask veterinarians to take on more responsibility, and would they even be willing to do that, since obviously they wouldn't be paid at the same rates for supervision of this. So if there's extra to add there, I'm happy to hear it. Otherwise, I'm happy with what I heard.
So direct supervision comes as part of the job. So most pets, and this is based off of the American Veterinary Shelter Association guidelines, which just came out in 2022, December of 2022, recommends that all animals in shelters on intake be examined, and then most of the vaccinations take place or should take place on intake. So in most practical senses, as long as the veterinarian's doing the exam and things like that, they can be there to supervise while the technician is administering things like that. Our concern is where there's not even a veterinarian in the building, but they are responsible legally, federally, for signing off on rabies certificates and putting their name for it. Say, we've had 30 of these cats vaccinated for rabies vaccines, but there's not even a veterinarian in the building because that facility does not have a veterinarian. So that's a main concern of ours, and that's why we recommend direct supervision to be cohesive. And there's also a risk, this is why everybody had to stay for 15 minutes after their COVID vaccine for vaccines. Legally, a registered technician cannot treat a pet for a vaccine reaction. Only a veterinarian is allowed to do that. So really, administering vaccines without a veterinarian on the premises is very risky. So we want to make sure that we're doing things to improve the quality and maintain the quality of medicine, to maintain the welfare of these animals. And
Okay, we're going to move on. I know there are some other questions, but we have 3 more bills, and it is 4 o'clock. So, thank you very much. That concludes the public hearing on that bill. All these issues will be taken up in the subcommittee. Let's move to House Bill 378, Delegate Love.
May I bring up my pen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, guess what? There are no opponents to this bill.
Okay.
Okay. Deep breath, my friends. No opponents, bipartisan bill. My cross file is Senator Bailey, okay? We're good. So, Senator West. Sorry, I was like, wait a second. That's not right. That's the other bill that I've got. So, good afternoon, Chair Brave. Members of this wonderful committee, I am Sarah Love, here to present for you HB 378, Natural Resources, Black Bear Conflict Reduction and Damage Reimbursement Fund. I'll be quick, we're all tired. We have in Maryland a fund to pay for damages caused by black bears. I mean, just stop for a moment and think about black bears. They're beautiful, they're iconic, they're wonderful. They also cause a lot of damage. This bill seeks to actually provide tools to prevent that damage. So right now, this fund is chronically underfunded, and it leaves people with very limited options. So if you have an interaction with a black bear and this black bear damages your property, the fund is oversubscribed and underfunded, so you're not going to get the money that you need. So what are you going to do? You're going to apply for a permit to kill the bear. And that's not helping anybody because the bears reproduce very slowly, so we're limiting our bear population. Another bear is going to move in and create the same damage, and we're not fixing the problem. So the vision of this bill is to broaden the fund, to fund it so that their funds are there, and it becomes a preventative
and a damage restitution fund. So with that, I ask for a favorable report, and I turn it over to my witness.
Okay, your trustee advisor here, Catherine Dangle, correct?
Correct. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Catherine Dangle, and I'm here to testify on House Bill 378. House Bill 378 will help with conflict prevention between bears and people. Bears have been harming livestock and crops despite numerous attempts to stop this. And now we see a permanent solution. This could be funding farmers to help protect crops. It could be funding people to use bear-proof trash cans. It could also be preventing bears from entering suburban areas or areas that have had previous conflicts with bears. This is our permanent solution. I know from experience that killing an animal really won't solve the problem because for a while the fox was attacking our chickens and eventually, sadly, the fox got hit by a car, but another fox moved in directly after him. It is the same way with the bears. We do need to focus on a permanent solution and we can't settle for a temporary one. We should also try to protect bears. Research has shown that bears are intelligent and care and grieve for members of their family. They are also incredibly good parents. They have shown to be very protective of their young. They also help the environment. They spread plant and berry seeds through their excrement and help maintain local prey populations. And this won't just help bears. This will also help animals like chickens who are threatened by bears, because sometimes bears can go after livestock. Killing the bears when this happens will not solve the solution, because just like in the fox situation, another bear will just move in. However, with House Bill 378, funding could make a permanent solution. In 2015, we lost $23,800 worth of crops to bears trying to find food, and this could have been saved by preventative measures. In summary, this bill will save lots of animal lives. This will create a permanent and a more peaceful solution. So please vote yes on House Bill 378.
Terrific testimony. All right, Lisa Radoff, beat that.
I was going to say, so for the record, Lisa Radoff from Maryland Votes for Animals. I know the hour is late. I wanted to say that when we first talked about this bill, people said, oh, Western Maryland, bears are just in Western Maryland. Well, Senator West, who is our Senate sponsor, had bears in the Pretty Boy area. So those of us who live in Baltimore County know that there are bears in Baltimore County.
Please tell me that Pretty Boy is an actual named area and not just wherever Senator West lives.
You said that. So yes, and there are also bears in Howard County. Also in talking to legislators about this bill, talking to various legislators who had homes in Western Maryland and had sustained bear damage. So while I know a lot of us who don't live in Western Maryland think, oh, it just is a very small amount of people that have bear damage, there is this kind of damage around the state, and this bill would be a worthwhile investment for Maryland to proactively deal with this, save the lives of bears, which I know most of us enjoy, and also help people who have sustained damage. Wanted to thank so much Delegate Love for sponsoring this bill and urge a favorable report.
All right, and next up is Jennifer Bevan Dangle. Any relation to Catherine?
I plead the fifth, delegate. So good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Bevan Dangle. I'm the State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. I'll be the downer. I'll talk about the fiscal note. I do want to acknowledge that we are asking the state for money, and the state is not going to forever be flush with cash. However, we are very flexible on the final funding amount. We hope that you will be so moved by the testimony here that you will speak to your colleagues in appropriations and tell them to do this for the bears, the farmers, and the young children. We're also aware that there are some possible funding mechanisms that are potentially moving down the pipe. A delegate on this committee has a bill that would significantly raise funding for the Wildlife and Heritage Services Fund. And we've spoken with some of the sponsors of that legislation. We've spoken with the Hunters of Maryland. Everyone feels that some of that money could safely be used for this program. So we don't see it as a completely unfunded request. And we do think, given the direct impact that bears have on, as you'll hear, farmers and especially grain producers, we think this is a very worthy investment for the state to make. So we also urge a favorable report at the level of funding that this committee deems appropriate.
All righty then. Listen, I'm going to call up Colby Ferguson, who's signed up favorable with amendments, and then we'll entertain questions for all of you simultaneously.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Colby Ferguson on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau, and we love this bill. We've been fighting for quite a while to address wildlife damage, and it's not just deer. That's probably the majority of our problems, but Canadian geese are a problem, resident Canadian geese, most importantly, but also bear, particularly in western Maryland, but now they're encroaching into Frederick County quite heavily in the Catoctin Mountains area. And then they're going to work their way across the state. We have too many native highways that we create all these green spaces along streams, and so the wildlife move quite rapidly through those. I'll just speak to our amendments. The way the bill is drafted, it changes the amounts that can be done in the damage or the restitution from 200 on the bottom to 3,000 on the top, and changes that to 500 and 5,000. The challenge that we have is the bottom side of that. By increasing that, some of our farmers are now using it to, if you guys remember at that time, Delegate McKay, who's now Senator McKay, had the bear costume that he came in with, and we had the bear issue in putting his hand in the honey. So from that bill, we actually have the ability to pay for the electric fence that goes around those, and most of those cases are under $500. So our ask is just to remove that minimum amount because there are some smaller needs, and also our worry is that 50,000 probably isn't enough. The last numbers that we did was about $68,000 worth of damage, and so we're just asking to bump that to 75. So I think it's a great bill. We hope you guys can move it.
It wasn't just a bear costume. He was dressed as Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh, yeah.
I neglected to call on Lindsay Thompson, who is a virtual witness. So, Lindsay, if you're still there, we'd love to hear from you. There she is.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Lindsay Thompson on behalf of Maryland Grain Producers Association in support of this bill. I think the others have covered it pretty well. I will just say that you usually hear me talking about deer. My farmers in Western Maryland will rival their bear to my Eastern Shore farmers' deer any day. A bear can destroy several acres of corn overnight. And so they are very supportive of this legislation, especially the provisions that allow for the prevention grants. Because at the end of the day, the farmers do not want to have to apply for and use lethal force on these bears. And so anything that we can do to avoid the conflict is seen as beneficial, and we urge your favorable report. Thank you.
We have a question. Delegate Terraza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Delegate Love. I appreciate all your testimony, especially Catherine. I just want to check, because I thought I saw you nodding your head. How do you feel about the Farm Bureau's amendments? Are you okay with it?
So I have no problem with dropping it back down to the 200. That's absolutely fine. Depending on the funding level, right. I mean, if we get funded at the request that we're asking for, absolutely go up to 75,000. But if it gets dropped down to 100,000, then I think we need to talk about the balance.
Yeah. Okay.
But absolutely open.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Delegate Love, for this bear of a bill. Tell me if anything, or Colby Ferguson can tell me about like how insurance potentially fits into this. So if I do have property and a bear comes, is there a way whether one has to get extra insurance or there's homeowners insurance that kind of can offset some of the cost of damage? Is that a such thing? Am I making it up?
Depends on the damage. There are riders you can put in for damage on your home. But as far as on the farmer side, crop insurance covers. However, what happens is what we have the problem in the deer, particularly in western Maryland bear, is it happens every year.
Sure.
And so what happens is that, let's say that field of 40 acres normally would grow 200 bushel of corn, but because of the damage, it only did 150 bushel. And if it does that for consecutive years, then the crop insurance goes and does a 3-year rolling average. So if now all of a sudden I'm only guaranteed at 150 bushel. So, and it's not because it won't grow that, it's just because the bear damage continues to be every year.
Ravishing.
So the crop insurance is only on the level of what your yields can be. So if we have chronic livestock or wildlife damage, it does divert your
And
crop
to the
insurance.
bill's point, Colby, if other measures were put in place to protect the corn, like a fence per se, they can help build back their yield and then I would say build back up insurance potentially?
Yeah,
And
if you
then-
don't have the damage from, typically crop insurance is for things like droughts or floods
Sure.
or hurricanes or tornadoes. But in our case, in Maryland, we're having to use it more for deer damage and bear damage and wildlife. So yeah, anything we can do to deter wildlife damage is going to be obviously better.
And someone could use, for instance, funding from this bill to offset maybe what insurance couldn't pay if they were trying to put up some preventive measures?
Especially if it was specific to bear damage and you didn't have that claimed under your homeowner's insurance, this could be a possibility.
Thanks so much.
I just have one quick question, and it can be for whomever wants to answer. Is there a definite provision in this bill that if you apply for a grant and you utilize that grant, that you also cannot apply for a permit to shoot a bear?
No, it doesn't affect the permits at all. The goal is to prevent the need for the permits, but people can still apply for the permits. And if you reduce the conflict, then you'll reduce the need for the permits.
Any conversation about? Okay, thank you.
Just joking. Yeah, no, do you have another question? I'm joking.
Unfortunately, the problem with the bear damage permit is, just like the young lady said, that you take out one problem and another one falls in suit. And so if you're in a population density that's relatively high, there's always going to be that conflict between bears and people. So I think having deterrents in place that are non-lethal is a much more efficient and effective way of doing it than just shooting them. So I don't think that I don't know where DNR would stand on this, but yeah, I think the key would be to try to prevent them from eating the corn would be the priority for us.
Well, we may consider asking DNR because there's a possibility that they might actually tell us. You never know. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. That ends, and by the way, Catherine, stellar testimony. What grade, Catherine, what grade are you in? I'm curious.
I'm in 7th grade.
All right, very good, very good. Okay, that ends the public hearing on that bill. We will now go to 386, Delegate Jacobs. Another bill with no opponents.
Don't touch the button. All right, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Delegate Jay Jacobs presenting House Bill 386. And this is a bill today that I'm presenting. It's an emergency bill to establish a commercial blue and flathead catfish, finfish, trot line license. Chapter 80 of 2019, which went into effect on June 1st, 2019, the same license proposed by this bill. However, Chapter 80 had a termination date of June 30th, 2022, so the legislation did sunset this past June. So a person who wishes to obtain the license must complete and submit an application for the license to DNR. An applicant does not need to hold a tidal fish license to be eligible for the license. And the term of the license is 1 year from September 1st through August 31st, and the annual fee is $15. These catfish are considered invasive top predators and pose a serious long-term threat to the bay's native species. Emergency Bill 386 will continue to provide another tool in the toolbox to help control the proliferation of these dangerous invasive species that are causing the ecosystem to be out of balance in the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. These fish grow up to 100 pounds each and eat pretty much anything and everything you can imagine in the bay. Very little they don't eat, and they have no real predator. They've become a very, very serious problem throughout the entire Chesapeake Bay, and that's the reason why this bill is an emergency measure to try and create any means possible to improve the harvest of this fish to get them out of the bay. This Senate bill, cross-file, Senate Bill 80, has already passed the Senate by a score of 45-0, so I'm hoping that we'll have a favorable vote on this bill and get it to the governor's desk for his signature as soon as possible.
All right.
Thank you very much, and I would also ask that you read the letters submitted by Chesapeake Bay Foundation and Maryland Sierra Club with
100 pounds, by my calculations, that's roughly 400 catfish tacos.
And in 2019, there was just a rough estimate of 100 million of these things in the Chesapeake Bay.
100 million?
That was in 19.
Okay.
And they are multiplying very quickly. But
Well,
we have an expert here from the Department of
Yes,
Natural Resources.
I was going to say, Sarah, would you like to give us 2 minutes of wisdom?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. It's good to see you all again. My name is Sarah Whitman, and I'm here on behalf of the Department of Natural Resources to testify in favor of House Bill 386. I'll skip through what it does because Delegate Jacobs did a wonderful job of that. But essentially, this bill is specifically targeting the ability of individuals to commercially harvest flathead and blue catfish. Again, invasive species the department is actively managing to control. They are it's hard to control them due to their size, consumption of prey, lack of predators. So this is a useful tool for us to employ in working to control the populations of these two in particular invasives. The majority of harvest under this license, previously when it was in place up through June, was from commercial tidal fish licensees who did not possess the correct authorizations to use a finfish trout line. So for example, they might have a crabbing license for crab pots, but they didn't have a finfish trot line ability. And so they use this as an add-on to their existing commercial business to be able to help us control that population. This bill would put that license back in place and allowing, once again, the expanded ability for harvesters to catch more blue and flathead catfish with a finfish trot line. Because of this importance of the license as a tool for fisheries management, the department asked for a favorable report. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this brilliant bill that has no opponents? No? Okay. Thank you very much. That's the end of the hearing for House Bill 386. Let's go to House Bill 389. Delegate Morgan, if you're out there. Or, oh, that Delegate Morgan. I was thinking of the other Delegate Morgan. Okay. Okay. All right. I wasn't going to be the one to say that openly. Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely. Okay. Delegate Morgan's first bill before this committee. There we go.
My first bill before this committee and my first bill, period. So be nice to the youngster.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the esteemed ENT Committee, I ask you today for a favorable report on HB 389. The bill was cross-filed with Senator Hester as SB 34. It's passed the Senate 45-0, and here we are today. As many of you know or may not know, value-added agriculture is a big business in the state of Maryland. It supports about 74,000 jobs, about $2.6 billion of annual impact and $875 million in revenue. So for somebody who doesn't know what value-added agriculture is, it's basically a process where we're able to take a raw agricultural product and turn it into something different to make the farmers and other people more money. Might be easier to explain it this way. Think of when you go to the store and you get chops or roast beef or something, or you go home and have a charcuterie board. So the charcuterie board, you take the raw meat and turn into sausages or something charcuterie. You take fruits, and the fruits are blemished. So you turn into jams or pies. Or you take dairy products and turn to yogurt or ice cream. It's a big business. So I have experts here a lot smarter than me. But in Southern Maryland, we're developing something called the Regional Agriculture Center. We have a slaughterhouse down there, FDA approved, run by the Amish. And we're going to nearby place the Regional Agriculture Center, so we can take that meat and then turn it over to a group called SMATIC, a representative from SMATIC, or at the very end to my right. And we're going to hopefully be able to expand the ability to produce these products and things like that. So what the bill is basically asking for, through some amendments the Senate has made, which I have no trouble with, is change the word ombudsman to specialist. And also being able to add livestock and agricultural service to this list of value-added activities. So with that, since the night is late, I would ask for your support on this bill with the amendments that the Senate put forth, and I beat my 4 minutes.
Okay, yes, you did, but you don't get anything for that.
Thank you.
But no opponents to the bill. So Craig Sewell, take it away.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am the project director for the Southern Maryland Agricultural Development Commission, better known as SMATIC. We are a division of the Tri-County Council of Southern Maryland. I'm advocating on behalf of this bill. There's an ever-increasing number of budding food entrepreneurs from all over Maryland wanting to sell their creations to friends and families, in farmers markets, and maybe even in their local grocery stores. There are many more establishments already operating under inspection that desperately need upgrading to their food safety plans to meet new regulations. We at SMATIC know the dilemma food entrepreneurs face, as we are one of the few go-to places to guide these aspirants through a maze of requirements, documentation, on-farm processing, temperature logging, packaging, and labeling. I'll offer 2 examples. Just last week, February 6, 2023, SMATIC, in cooperation with the State of Maryland Department of Health, hosted a how-to seminar for producing, processing, and retailing cottage foods in Maryland. There were over 300 signups, over 200 arrived for the presentation, over 50 questions from the audience, and many, many, many more into our offices after the webinar. The need for guidance and instruction is real. On May 8, 2021, the Amish opened their red meat processing facility in St. Mary's County, the culmination of a 2.5-year project between the Amish and SMATIC. I wrote the HACCP, I wrote the SSOPs, the SOPs, and the GMP plans to meet USDA regulations. The only assistance available to me was found studying case studies, reading available literature, and visitations to other abattoirs. Federal regulators only appear at final inspections and are only in the business, I quote, of regulation, not instructing or advising. I would advise a favorable report.
And how about Charlotte Davis? Welcome to the committee. Welcome back to the committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Charlotte Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Rural Maryland Council. We're an independent state agency located in the Maryland Department of Agriculture. And we each year survey our membership, and farming and keeping farming viable and profitable are a top priority for the council. One of the ways we do that is we advise farmers to look at value-added agriculture, look at ways that they could convert their crops, their products into a value-added product that will have a greater value and a longer shelf life. But those regulations for those individuals to navigate from permitting, zoning, health inspections is difficult. And so having this ombudsman would be that person to help assist those entrepreneurs, those farmers, to gain access to value-added agriculture. So with that, we ask for your favorable support of House Bill 389. Thank you.
All righty then, let's go to Colby Ferguson, who is here. Colby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, member of the committee. Colby Ferguson on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau for the third time today. I'll be short and sweet. This bill, if you heard, is a bill that addresses a big problem that really got accentuated through the COVID pandemic when all of a sudden people wanted to buy local and farmers wanted to supply it but weren't able to find processing facilities to do it. And then we tried to build them and you couldn't do that either. And so a lot of farmers just threw their hands up and said, well, we'll stand in line right now. If I raise pigs, so if I were to call the processing facility, takes about 6 months from the time they're born till they're ready to be processed. Right now it's 9 to 10 months out. So I actually have to schedule a processing appointment before they're ever born and hope that they actually are born. So needing processing facilities, particularly meat processing, is absolutely critical in the state. And we hope this is one of the ways that through a summer study that we looked at is one of the biggest roadblocks is it's just almost impossible as a farmer to come in and say, okay, I want to do this. Well, I've got possibly county permitting issues, planning and zoning issues. I have possibly Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Environment permits that I would need. And I might need or possibly need USDA permitting and requirements such as Craig talked about. So a farmer doesn't even know where to start. Do you start at the county and work your way up? Do you start, which that's actually the wrong way to go. You should start at the USDA, find out what you actually need to build, and then go to the county and work your way through. So we need somebody to help us navigate through this, and we do believe this is absolutely a necessity. And I'll conclude with our good friend Delegate Clark called me at the beginning of the session and said, hey, I've got a good friend, Delegate Morgan, that's looking for a bill. Can you help him out? And I said, I've got a sweet one for him. So thank you.
Righty. Let's go to Steve Connolly, then we'll pick up, we'll get Lindsay on virtual, and then Robert Kozak in that order.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Steve Connolly, Deputy Secretary, Maryland Department of Agriculture. We're here in support of House Bill 389. We think it's a needed position at the department. I've had conversations with the newly confirmed secretary, and we believe would put it actually in the office of the secretary to make sure that it had enough prominence to get some action with our partners out there in the food industry. And it's really the role is to help producers navigate through the regulatory maze that they have to navigate through. So I urge a favorable report, and thank you.
Okay, Lindsay, if you're still with us, we'd love to hear from you now. Lindsay Thompson? She's not here. Okay, then we will go to Robert Kozak, who's signed up favorable with amendments. Tell us what your amendment is, and then we will go to questions.
Okay, I thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Bob Kozak. I'm president of Atlantic Biomass, LLC, out of Frederick, Maryland. We develop biotech processes to convert low-value feedstocks into high-value biofuels, such as sustainable aviation fuels. I'd like to say really support what you're doing here, and I hope within a year or two, the Ombudsman will be reporting such successes that the General Assembly will upgrade value-added agriculture to a departmental division with appropriate funding for our friend, wherever we go back here. Anyways, I have two additions that I would suggest to this. You've heard already the general existing definition of what you think of when you see value added, which is jellies and jams and meat. But there's another one where you actually take the biomass or you take the corn and you turn that into a really high value product such as biofuels. So therefore, I would suggest that a definition be added to this bill something that says that includes all greenhouse gas reducing value-added products such as renewable, sustainable fuels, chemicals, and related products. And I think that's important for two reasons. One is the governor is really stressing the reduction of greenhouse gases. And furthermore, due to some really good changes that have come through the Inflation Reduction Act, Maryland farmers and growers would be able to get some really great tax credits for these products. So I would suggest that a definition be added to expand value added beyond the traditional into such things as biofuels. And furthermore, I just suggest also when you have the wording of provide information regarding state and federal regulations, I would like you to add something to say and funding opportunities and talk about how hard it is to navigate the federal opportunities, grants.gov, et cetera. I think they'd be a great addition, and I fully support this bill.
Okay, questions for the sponsor?
Bring them on.
Okay, who really has a question? Okay, you made it out unscathed.
Thank you.
Congratulations. All right, that is the last bill for the afternoon. We are going to have our leadership meeting at 5:15, which should give my two subcommittees enough time to meet. So, announcements. Okay, Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have an idea of the length of time for our?
I don't think the leadership meeting is going to be super long today.
Great. We will meet Housing Real Property at midnight. No, Housing Real Property, 5:15. How about 6?
Oh, you want to meet after?
Oh, you want to go before? Housing Real Property will meet 4:45.
Okay. Okay. Delegates, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Environment Subcommittee will also meet at 4:45.
Okay. Any other announcements by anybody else? There is a dinner at Ruth Chris tonight at 6 o'clock. So, you know, doesn't happen often for us, so. Okay. We're adjourned. That's right. Yeah.
When did you say your leadership?
5:15.
Oh, okay.
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, what's up?